could not be with us last night, but thank you for making the effort to make the opening remarks at our Agora.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear Mariya, dear Sneska. Allow me to take this opportunity to warmly greet you in our beautiful capital. It is with great regret that I had to cancel my attendance at the European Heritage Award ceremony yesterday at the last minute. But due to the state budget approval at the government meeting, where of course I could not to be absent. Unfortunately, considering the fact that I have to inform the public about yesterday's result, I will not to be able to stay with you at the end even today. I'll be represented at today's debate by my deputy Vlastislav Ouroda. We all agree that cultural heritage care and protection is our common European task, which we must work towards in the long term. And I'm convinced that this year's European Cultural Heritage Summer will also contribute to this. We are therefore extremely honored that this year's summit was held in the Czech Republic and that the Ministry of Culture was able to contribute to its realization. I wish you a successful meeting. I'm really, really sorry that I have to leave now. I'm really sorry. I know it's complicated, but thank you very much once more and have a nice time in Prague. And Mariya, Sneska, thank you very much for this.
Thank you for everything. As you can see, it's not easy to start this morning after the ceremony last night. I think we are still in the emotion of last night, so we apologize that we didn't start punctually at 9:30. But thank you all for being in the room. And before we begin with our opening session, it is my great pleasure to invite here also to address you the Vice Mayor of the Prague District 1, Mr. Petr Burgr. If we are in this extraordinary neo-Renaissance palace, it is thanks to the District Prague 1, and this is basically the World Heritage sort of city of Prague. And I would like to ask Mr. Burgr to address the Agora. Good morning, and thank you so much.
Dobré ráno, dámy a pánové. Tady pro mnohé hosty možná ukážu lahodnou češtinu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I would like to address you in nice and nice sounding Czech language.
Nacházíme se v nádherném paláci Žofín, který je jedno z kulturních center Prahy.
We are actually present in the beautiful Palais of Žofín, which is one of the cultural centers of Prague.
V 90. letech proběhlo rozsáhlou rekonstrukcí a uběhlo několik let, přišel rok 2002, příroda řekla své a byly ohromné povodně.
It was actually substantially renewed and repaired during the 90s, but then the nature expressed its own say, and the floods came in 2002, and we could start again.
Aby toho nebylo málo, tak prožili jsme taky pandemii COVID-19, ale vaše přítomnost je ukázkou toho, že už to máme za námi.
Well, on top of that, we had to be through the COVID pandemic as well, but the fact that you are here today is the evidence that we seem to be over that.
Dámy a pánové, tento sál já osobně mám velmi rád, protože tady jsem se učil tančit klasické tance.
Ladies and gentlemen, I personally like this hall very much, as this was the venue where I was attending the dance classes.
Takže vítejte.
So welcome.
Děkuji vám, pane předsedo. Děkuji.
Thank you so much, and please also convey our warmest thanks to the mayor of Prague District 1 and for all the hospitality that we are enjoying here in this beautiful city. So, dear colleagues and friends, Madam Commissioner, Mr. Executive President, there we are. This is the final third act of the European Cultural Heritage Summit in Prague. This is the ballroom. We will not be dancing, but we will have very, very intense and important policy conversation, which we believe are of great importance for the future of Europe. You have seen the title of our Agora is For a Value and Culture-Driven Europe. I believe that the ceremony last night probably was the best illustration and confirmation that that plea that we want to make is a fundamental plea that we all need to make at all levels of governance. So I have here all those sort of opening remarks. I said the ceremony was, in fact, the perfect opening, ouverture, for the policy conversations that we're going to have here. And I just want, before giving the floor to our eminent speakers for the opening session, to make another bridge. Petr, we are talking that Prague is the city of music and the city of bridges. The bridge between Venice and Prague. 1 year ago, we have had our summit in Venice, and the Agora that we organized in Venice was entitled From the New European Bauhaus to New European Renaissance. Neo-Renaissance building, where we are. Could we have imagined that 1 year later we would be now in Prague, in the context, geopolitical context that we are living now in Europe, with war being back in Europe, and not easy to talk about Renaissance, but at the same time, even more important to talk about new European Renaissance, when the values of Europe, fundamental values, are endangered. Not only culture, cultural heritage, but the values are in danger. And that's why our message and our Agora discussion is so important today. And the last remark, we are calling, as you know, this but the President of the European Commission will be in Athens tomorrow morning, on Thursday morning. She will be in the Agora, the ancient Agora of Athens, making a speech in the Athens Democracy Forum. So there again, the link between cultural heritage and culture and our fight for democracy, the rule of law, peace in Europe. So all these topics are, I think, in our mind, and I think there is nobody better than Commissioner Mariya Gabriel to deliver us her remarks, her contribution to this fundamental debate. Mariya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Sneska, dear Executive President, dear friends of cultural heritage. Well, I would like to start by thanking Europa Nostra for being a long-standing, unwavering partner of ours at the European Commission. And this is why I'm really very happy to be here with you, because remember, the European Cultural Heritage Summit was introduced during the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018, and the fact that it continues to bring the community together year on year means something. something strong, something tangible, something that it's really up to all of us to transmit to the next generation. So for me, first of all, it shows the commitment of everyone in this room to culture and to our unique cultural heritage. But it also shows that the European year had a lasting impact. Its follow-up is tangible, and our efforts then to bring the community together continue to bear fruit. So I cannot imagine a more pressing time for this community to come together and fight for a value-based and culture-driven Europe. After 2 years dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic, we are now witnesses to a war that broke out on the European continent as the result of the Russian aggression against Ukrainian sovereignty. We have seen the ongoing efforts of Putin to muzzle Ukrainian culture and identity. Despite international conventions, international instruments aimed at preventing such actions, cultural heritage has been destroyed and some more is under threat as we speak. So, in my short address today, I would like to stay focused on two main issues. Of course, first, our support for Ukraine, because that's value in action. And of course, after, I would like to share with you how together we can transform culture into the binding element throughout all policies to face the biggest challenges of our times, notably climate change. So first, let me begin by recalling that to stand up for our values and for the preservation of culture in Europe is to stand on the side of peace and righteousness. And we have every intention to show that this is where we stand by helping safeguard and restore Ukrainians' cultural heritage. Dear Deputy Minister, we are so glad that you are with us. Major crises like COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, but also climate change, do require a culture-driven response. Not least because culture has always been at the intersection of unity, solidarity, understanding, and peace, but also because it fosters the creativity we need to find suitable solutions. We cannot respond to the barbarity of war without the humanity culture carries with it. And so, as European Commission, we are working alongside all of you, our partners, to deliver. Remember, since the beginning of the war, we have been supporting and will go on to support the Ukrainian cultural and creative sectors and its professionals. We'll continue to provide grants, mobility schemes, mapping the cultural and creative actors and their needs through different programs. Maybe just to mention some examples: House of Europe program, Culture Moves Europe, Creative Europe, or the EU for Culture Regional Project and Cultural Relations Platform Initiative. Just a few examples. In the framework of House of Europe, we had a specific grant aimed at digitalizing Ukrainian museum collections and developing a digital register of national cultural heritage. In 2023, we are setting up €5 million worth of targeted actions from the Creative Europe program, all to the benefit of Ukrainian cultural organizations and professionals. A special call has been launched 2 weeks on the 13th of September. I'm not speaking only, we have to act. And we already adopted a €2 million project on safeguarding cultural heritage led by the Alif Foundation. Beyond financial support, my team is also working with Ukrainian professionals on quality methodology and practices in order to safeguard their cultural heritage. We started a discussion with the Deputy Minister yesterday. Count on our support. And all of this, in addition to the projects launched already in 2022, which already involve Ukrainian partners, notably in cooperation and projects in literature and translation. Remember, we have winners from Ukraine for this year's edition of the European Prize of Literature. So you can understand all these actions are aimed at supporting the cultural sector in Ukraine. Yet we are also in constant dialogue with Interpol and Europol to prevent illicit trafficking of Ukrainian cultural goods. We don't talk enough about this. And we need simply not to repeat some of the errors that we already have seen in the past. So what I would like to express here, it's my hope that all these actions will have positive impact. Because we cannot forget that we are not the main actors in the struggle to preserve and protect Ukrainian heritage. We can only stand by the Ukrainian people who are first line. Yesterday, I was really so proud to see our Ukrainian laureates along the 30 heritage initiatives awarded with these European Heritage Awards, Europa Nostra Awards. And again, my warmest congratulations, because that's not a simple prize. That's a symbol that together with culture, we can build and rebuild peace. That's the fundamental value of what unites us. Of course, with the challenges of the war in parallel, we need to harness the power of culture to contribute to our solution to the ever-growing threat of climate change. And here, I would like to say, dear Sneska, that in my mind, always Europa Nostra will stay the first one to raise the role of culture for succeeding our ambitions in the framework of the Green Deal. I will never forget a lot of surprised faces. What are you talking about? At the same time, a lot of impressed faces, concrete solutions, concrete needs, practices. So what I would like to say here is that really thanks to you, and in the framework of this Green Deal and climate change ambitions, what you have shown to us is that culture is our oxygen. It makes us feel alive. It keeps the treasures of heritage alive throughout the centuries. And it is a powerful driver to bring our societies together through the common sense of belonging, which can be only developed otherwise. However, culture should not be limited to cultural heritage and common values. Culture is also an innovating ecosystem with a unique ability to come up with creative solutions to the most pressing challenges we face. So I think that, yes, that's a chance that for the first time, the Commissioner for Culture is responsible for innovation too. The Commissioner for Education and Youth is responsible for research. So it's really up to us to use this opportunity. And I would like again to express my gratitude to Europa Nostra, because that's for me the main actor showing that synergies, innovative solutions, that means something concrete on the ground, especially because people coming from the world of cultural heritage, from cultural and creative industries, are so strongly involved. So my question here is how we can use the different possibilities that we have in order to transform culture into the driver of this climate change action. Because we have a lot. We have your action already, Just last week, we published a report where 25 member states worked a lot in order to show good practices, how we can strengthen the cultural heritage resilience for climate change. And you know how much I stay prudent with the open method of coordination, because I think that this simply don't speak to any simple citizen. We need really to see how together we can transform some of the good conclusions or recommendations into something that will be with great sense for our citizens. And that's a challenge. The other thing, it's of course our initiative on the new European Bauhaus. And you mentioned that's my bridge. Where we are, we started from scratch. We simply said that the new European Bauhaus, that's the soul of the European Green Deal. That's a bridge between the world of science and technology and the world of art and culture. But we are fully aware that we need sustainable solutions, sustainable funding. We need to see how all this extraordinary mobilization that we witnessed with the new European Bauhaus can be transformed into critical mass of people working together and showing that here, by this ecosystem approach, we can unlock the potential of the cultural and creative industries and sectors in Europe. And cultural heritage, for me, here has a particularly important role to play, because we can't shape the future without taking care of what those that were our predecessors transferred to us. So that's a challenge. We need to see how this new European Bauhaus initiative will definitely transform our daily lives and living spaces. And yeah, I call on your imagination to continue to co-create together with us this inclusive and sustainable future that is beautiful. And Sneska will always repeat here that Europa Nostra was for me the first one to be so excited by showing that, again, on our European continent, we are talking about beauty. And we need to insist on that, because even today, that's beautiful for our eyes, for our minds, for our souls. And yes, I think that here the challenge is to see how together we can go to the next step. I will say in only one sentence here: count on my firm support and the support of Horizon Europe program. I can't reveal everything at this stage, but for me it's really important that we continue just simply to do what you are doing. You are bringing together people from different backgrounds, cutting across disciplines, and building on participation at all levels. And that's a lesson that we learned from you. Now, that's not the only one example. You can see we talk spontaneously about Creative Europe program, about the work with our member states. We have then the new European Bauhaus. My plea is really think out of the box and think more spontaneously about the new cluster on culture and creativity within Horizon Europe program. What I can see that until now, the world of cultural heritage, cultural creative sectors don't think spontaneously about these new opportunities created by Horizon Europe program, and think more and more about the new European Institute of Innovation and Technology and the new community of innovation and communication that we created 2 months ago. Remember, I took the engagement to do it 2 years ago. Now it's here, and it's here for you. We would like to have our first actions in 1 year. So we need here your contribution. We need your expertise. We need your innovative ideas. And I'm sure that this Agora will help us a lot. So again, different elements, at least those elements were not here 2 years ago. We have Creative Europe, we have Horizon Europe, we have a new kick with the EIT, we have Next Generation. So again, for me, the challenge is let's continue to work together in order to have content, but content that is adequate to your needs, not the needs of the European Commission. That's the most important. So allow me here just to take 1 minute more and to talk about young people, because we need the energy of our young generation. Is the European Year of Youth. And yes, we have to talk much more about what will be the legacy of youth engaged in cultural heritage for this European Year of Youth, because we don't have so much time. But for me, young people are our natural allies in our mission. They are the future custodians of our cultural heritage and have been consistent advocates for sustainability and climate neutrality. So I'm so grateful here to see Europa Nostra as a firm supporter of youth engagement, solidifying this bridge between our communities. Definitely the word bridge will be one of the key words in this edition of the Agora. So, dear friends, before I conclude, I would like to leave you with a quote of former Czech President Václav Havel. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. This is the belief that sustains the strong resistance in Ukraine, the righteousness of their cause, and we stand beside them in this pursuit. We'll add our weight to their cause and preserve our continent's cultural heritage, along with the rich tapestry of culture that informs the very idea of Europe. Because as per President Havel's words, it makes sense. The power of creative thinking and imagination will continue to provide us with the vision of the future we want, a fairer future for all citizens. And this is the ultimate sense of any political commitment. So now I wish all of you, Europa Nostra, young people, heritage enthusiasts, my dear friends, a very productive Agora. Together we can not only picture a future guided by peace and the values of the European Union, but also set it in motion as we leverage our creativity to enmesh our culture in everything we do. Thank you very much.
You don't always say wow for a speech, but you know, I would like to say that what an impressive keynote, dear Commissioner, dear Mariya. You said it all, and you made all the bridges possible. And also, you gave us a lot of homework. You have clearly said yesterday, our executive president said, quoted also President Havel saying, Europe is a task. You said Europa Nostra is a task. You clearly showed that being a European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Education, Culture, it's a task, and you are taking it very seriously, and it is a joy. It is a joy and the responsibility, indeed, that we carry all these agendas and deliver on all these agendas. And thank you for this wonderful line. Culture and cultural heritage is our oxygen. I loved it. I loved it. The oxygen that we all lack, and that's why it's important. So after this, you can stay with us, I think, until the end of this opening session. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to our Czech host, the Czech Ministry of Culture. After the minister, we also have the Vice Minister who is responsible for cultural heritage, Mr. Vlastislav Ouroda, so the floor is yours.
Dear European Commissioner, dear Deputy Minister, dear Executive Director, dear Secretary General, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Europa Nostra has decided to hold the European Cultural Heritage Summit 2022 here in Prague. We perceive this decision as a great distinction for the Czech Republic. Your wide and expert-based activities are a fundament of promoting the care of cultural heritage in the institutions of European Union as well as in general public. Let me thank you for your long-term work and for coming here. I believe that today's meeting can contribute to unity of all involved stakeholders in current challenges we are facing. It's a great honor for me to greet you on behalf of the Czech Minister of Culture, Mr. Martin Baxa, in this unique building and in our country with nice landscape, by the way, mentioned in the national anthem. A country with picturesque small towns and villages. We pride ourselves on having 600 urban protected areas, approximately 40,000 listed monuments, and 15 UNESCO heritage sites. I hope that you will have a chance to see at least some of them during your stay here. I am very proud that I can welcome you in a country led by democratic government. Thankfully, without influence of populists or extremists on decision-making processes in executive, despite a strong Russian pressure on our democratic institutions. Fortunately, our government expresses clear statements during current difficult situation after the Russian unprovoked aggression on the peaceful Ukraine. Now I, as a citizen, can feel pride that Czechia is a firm element in the community of European democratic states. My personal happiness is based on the fact that I had a chance to join the effort for preservation of monuments in this country at the beginning of the 90s. It was a great opportunity to cooperate with many brave people and organizations. Nowadays, Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic cooperates with numerous NGOs from our branch, including the big as well as the local ones. I would like to name only two of them here. The Association of the Owners of Castles and Chateaus, co-organizer of this summit. My special thanks belong to Madam President Jana Germenis-Hildbrand and to Petr Svoboda, who is a spiritus movens of this event on our side. The second one I want to specially mention is the Institute for Monuments and Culture. Our country is involved in an international cooperation focused on values of culture as a fundament of our lives. We highly appreciate initiatives like the Davos Declaration or the new European Bauhaus. The most important challenges of upcoming years is the climate change and its mitigation. In this point, we need joint effort over the borders of Europe. Now, after 3 decades of peaceful development, after strengthening of the civil society, we are facing an incredible threat from the side of aggressive imperialistic Russia. History of our country in 20th century is less horrible than in Poland, for example, yet our society still feels strongly 2 historic traumas. The first is the occupation by Nazis in 1939, the result of an appeasement policy from the side of the powerful Western countries. The second is the occupation by Soviet Union in 1968. That's why we understand feelings of brave Ukrainian nation very well now. There is no space for a new appeasement. Aggressor considers only the real power. And the only chance for the future of Europe is to stay strong and united. Ladies and gentlemen, let me please express strong belief that our joint effort for the value and culture-driven Europe is an important condition for upcoming successful and peaceful life in our beloved part of the world. We must not forget that happiness of one part of the world is strongly connected with a good life in other ones. That's why it's so important for us to involve in worldwide activities led by UNESCO or NGOs focused on cultural heritage like ICOMOS, ICOM, and the others. Ladies and gentlemen, let me wish you a fruitful session and a nice stay in the Czech Republic. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the Czech host, the Czech presidency of the European Union. It is, of course, just, I would say, at the beginning also, our summit here, one of the objectives is that our representation also in the Czech Republic become much stronger, and also that the input from the Czech Republic in the work of our ever-growing European movement become much stronger. And with Petr Svoboda, with the help also of the Czech ministry, we feel that we are, we are in a good direction to achieve that. And also at the end of this Agora, we will definitely communicate to you the Prague Manifesto that we very much hope will also inspire the work of the Czech presidency, because you have an important task, again, talking about the task, the new work plan for culture that will be adopted during the Czech presidency. So we very much hope that cultural heritage will be, not hope, we know that it's going to have a due place, an important place in that work plan, and then we will be working together. Now, Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine is on our mind at every moment. Madam Commissioner, you spoke about that. We have seen how Ukraine was also celebrated last night. But also we have with us the Vice Minister of Culture in person, who will address us in the closing session. But now is the big challenge. We are going to try to establish a live connection with Oleksandr Tkachenko, Minister of Culture and Information from Ukraine. Let's see whether the technology... Yes, wonderful. Mr. Minister, welcome to Prague. Welcome.
Thank you.
We immensely appreciate that you you in person wanted to connect with this Agora, and we give you the floor.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues from all over Europe. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for support and standing with Ukraine for more than 7 months of this difficult year. During this time, we felt really part of European space, and special thanks to Commissioner Mariya Gabriel. The full-scale war in Ukraine completely changed not only our understanding of the world in which we lived, but also our attitude to values and traditions. The understanding that we can lose them at any moment forces us to take even more seriously the safeguarding of our culture heritage. All the Ukrainians have united unprecedentedly to preserve our Ukrainian freedom, territory, culture, but not only Ukrainian, all European values. Ukrainian culture has more than 1,000-year history. Russia's full-scale invasion in the territory of Ukraine causes mass, seriously destructions of civilian objects, in particular cultural institutions and cultural heritage sites. Even UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Ukraine are under the threat of destruction. Since the beginning of the Russian military invasion on the 24th of February, the territory of sovereign peaceful Ukraine, the occupiers have been destroying the historical monuments of our country every day. Today, Ministry of Culture and Information Policy has documented more than 500 episodes of Russian war crimes against Ukrainian culture heritage. And to our great regret, we continue to record new losses. For instance, recently they bombed Mykolaiv theater, it's in the south Ukraine, where people were continuing to work. And our the Russian military cynically destroys museums, memorials, university buildings, bombard churches, monuments, cerebrally trying to deny the very fact of existence of Ukrainian culture and art. We have to do everything possible to protect, restore, and preserve our unique heritage. Together with our international partners, we have to draw attention to the war crimes of Russian aggressor country in Ukraine, to restore and preserve the objects of culture heritage Ukraine that suffered from Russian military aggression, and generally popularize Ukrainian culture throughout the world. Today's policy Agora plans to mobilize forces and voices in solidarity with Ukraine. Therefore, my request to you today is not to be silent and to make your voices louder. We gather today to discuss the problems, and I believe that a solution can come only after voicing the problems and challenges. Today, it's high time for Europe to act and show that it remains faithful to fundamental values. Today and every day, we must not to forget that the Russian military is shelling and bombing our cities. The Russian military is destroying our culture heritage. The Russian military is killing civilians and children who did it the theater from the war. Such brutal cruelty shows only one thing. The goals of Russians is to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainians, physically, mentally, and historically. Not only restoration of already destroyed culture heritage, but also their preservation from more destructions are on our agenda. A large number of objects were left without roofs and windows after shelling, and we need conservation, immediate conservation. Taking this opportunity, I would like to appeal to you to help in the urgent conservation of our objects in the preparation to winter. I sincerely hope that extension of your support in times when we need it more than ever. Ukraine needs involvement of patrons, donors, representatives of governments in preservation and reconstruction of Ukrainian culture heritage and its restoration. Any targeted donation to support Ukrainian heritage as well as cultural institutions would be very much appreciated. This war dramatically changed our plans. However, according to our latest sociological surveys, more than 70% of Ukrainian culture figures continue to work in Ukraine and continue to act in Ukraine. Most of them combine work with volunteering. Today, our culture ambassadors work in all corners of Earth, and a large number of them concentrated in Europe. Today, as never before, culture is becoming a driver of social and digital transformation. Despite the difficult situation, Ukrainians have already implemented more than 40 international projects in cooperation with more than 100 partners and institutions from 29 European countries. Ukraine joined various powerful initiatives, in particular this year. For the first time, 2 our projects won European Union awards in field of cultural heritage. St. Andrew Church in Kiev won the category Conservation and Adaptive Growth, and Vyshyvanka Day, which began as a student festival, has turned into an annual holiday celebrated at the international level, and it helps to preserve the iconic Ukrainian Vyshyvanka as an important element of heritage of Ukrainian people. That is why this project received an award in category Citizens Engagement and Awareness Prizing. The world supports for Ukrainian culture showed how important our heritage is for the world. Now we see how Ukrainian initiatives have entered the list of best practices in the conservation of cultural heritage. These awards proved once again that we are moving the right direction, supporting local initiatives and preserving cultural heritage at all levels, from local to international. And at the end, one quote, our famous British-American writer Thomas Eliot. He once said that probably in the modern history, Russia was the unique nation who turned culture to politics, trying to bomb and keep the nation, the culture of nations they're trying to take off. Only if we stand together, stand with Ukraine, then we can win in this war. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for your extremely forceful and moving contribution to this fundamental Agora debate that we are having here in Prague. If you would have been last night in the State Opera, you would have felt how much we stand with Ukraine, with how much we stand in solidarity with your impressive efforts that you are making to resist and to sort of to defend what you said, our Europe's cultural heritage and values in Ukraine. And that's why we are all with you. We have had with the Commissioner, of course, with the European Commission, showing us the leadership, strong leadership, and then with all the civil society organizations here gathered in Prague, we can assure you that we will offer as much support we can. You can count on us, and we will hopefully soon come to Kiev to celebrate also the award that we have given to...
You are always welcomed.
We shall soon come. You determine the date, and we will come, I think, with hopefully, and with the Commissioner Gabriel and with our Executive President, we will come to clearly demonstrate our support and to visit you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and every strength, we are with you. I'm afraid Commissioner Gabriel has to catch the plane. We would like to have her to stay, and I know that you would like also to stay with us for the whole Agora. But thank you once again for everything you do. This partnership is an amazing partnership, and let's continue to move mountains and build bridges. Yeah. See you soon. So we just said goodbye to one formidable Bulgarian lady, and we are now going to show to you the video message from another European leader from Bulgaria, Iyana Pavlova, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. As you know, we are so proud of the partnership between Europa Nostra and the European Investment Bank Institute within the program of the 7 most endangered that we develop with our executive vice president, Guy Kloos. And now it's a pleasure to show you the video. She really wanted to be here because she's also responsible for the Czech Republic. She couldn't be in person and she has recorded a video and I would like now to play her contribution and the European Investment Bank contribution to the debate of today in Prague.
Commissioner Gabriel, dear Mariya, Vice Minister, Minister Tkachenko, Mr. Parzinger, Madame Quaedvlieg Mihailovic, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to represent the European Investment Bank in this opening session of the 2022 European Heritage Summit. And I'm really very sorry I cannot be with you in person in the wonderful city of Prague for this event. This is a special heritage summit. The war in Ukraine has been going for 8 months with no end in sight. Lives have been lost. People have been displaced. Economic activity has been disrupted. Buildings and infrastructure, landscapes and cultural heritage sites have been destroyed. It's too early to say what will become of the 7 World Heritage Sites in the Ukraine, not to mention the countless churches, monuments and museums. The European Union and its bank, the EIB, remain unshakable in our support and solidarity with Ukraine and its people, in its hour of need and in the longer-term supports for its reconstruction. Just weeks after Russia's invasion, the EIB rapidly deployed almost 700 million euro to Ukrainian government for urgent liquidity needs. Last July, in close cooperation with the Commission, we increased this support by 1.6 billion euros. We have also put in place a 4 billion euros support package for EU member states, which have accommodated Ukrainians that had to leave their country. The EIB Institute coordinated unprecedented humanitarian aid package of 2.5 million for 7 NGOs to help the people affected by the war in Ukraine. Beyond this, the planning phase for countrywide reconstruction should start now, even if full-scale rebuilding can only take place once the war is over. The challenge will be immense, and we as EU and global partners and supporters of Ukraine should be ready. It is now that Europe needs to rethink, rebuild and repower, as the motto chosen by the Czech presidency of the EU. The EIB, working in partnership with other IFIs and of course with the European Commission, can provide decades of technical experience and financial expertise and quickly refocus existing financial resources. In this reconstruction, cultural heritage will have a role to play. Because cultural heritage is about far more than stones and bones from the past. It's a key resource for our European identity, without which economic growth is meaningless. Cultural heritage has a cohesive power which connects European people and communities. Whether we like it or not, we are all intrinsically connected to our past, as Hermann Parzinger said in its essay Togetherness, a new heritage deal for Europe, published by the European Investment Bank. This cohesive power is also what we can do to help to rebuild Ukraine when the war eventually ends. The cohesive power can also help delivering on European Green Deal. This is what the Cultural Heritage Green Paper published last year by Europa Nostra and economists demonstrates. We must not forget climate change realities. We have still a very long way to go when it comes to climate. And it's EIB transforming faster than anyone. And here again, we stand ready to help our partners. In conclusion, I would like to underline the strong and fruitful cooperation between the EIB Institute, Europa Nostra, Europe's leading cultural heritage organization, most notably in the 7 Most Endangered program. Every year, the 7 laureates illustrate the diversity and richness of European cultural heritage. I eventually hope that when the reconstruction of Ukraine begins, those priceless heritage items will be restored, protected, and renewed in ways that show that we are not luxuries, that they are one of the essence, and that the fact that we understood applied all over Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.
This is always music to my ear and to our ears to hear the European Investment Bank talking about culture and cultural heritage with such ardently, and have them as partner is quite something. Now to end the opening session, my pleasure to give the floor to the voice of civil society, because we have had all the institutions represented, but our executive president, Hermann Parzinger, will contribute to this fundamental conversation from the point of view of civil society and from point of view of Europa Nostra. So Hermann, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dear Vice Ministers of Ukraine and Czech Republic, dear colleagues, friends, dear members of the Europa Nostra family. Thank you for the attendance and the contribution to the European Heritage Policy Agora. I think it's very important for us that we had really high-level speakers. Also, of course, we all understand that the Commissioner had to leave, but it was very important that she spoke to us, that she has been here in person, not only yesterday in the ceremony, but also today in this Agora meeting. And of course, her words have been really impressive. I think this was one of the best speeches from a Commissioner of Culture, if I am allowed to say that. I heard and I did hear quite a lot of them. So and it clearly gave us already some perspectives how we have to work and where we have to develop together. And therefore the topic of this Agora is quite well chosen for a value and culture-driven Europe. Europe is at a crossroads. The climate crisis, the pandemic, now the war in Ukraine, other challenges are waiting for us, energy costs, something which is very important also for cultural institutions, and many other things, and we still don't know what still is waiting for us as challenges resulting from these crises. And therefore it's very important to talk about values, what is bringing us really together. I wrote an essay, it was already published last year by the European Investment Bank, called Togetherness. Europe is, and I'm convinced, Europe is more than just a network of trade agreements or something like that, or financial exchanges. I know this is very important for well-being of societies, of our countries, and this is always a basis for making work in cultural heritage possible. But nevertheless, when crises are starting, first cracks are starting in financial question, financial field, and in others. And therefore, what is bringing us together? Is it really these trade and financial agreements? It must be something more, something deeper, because then, if the cracks are appearing, we have more ability to overcome these cracks. And it's also important that Europe is shaped by our connections in history and culture, and cultural heritage is showing this very clearly. Cultural heritage is showing how different we are and how strongly we are all interconnected in Europe. Therefore, I think it is crucial to think about a value-based and culture-driven Europe. But how to achieve this? Which values? I mean, some of these topics will be addressed in the following panels. But nevertheless, let me address to three values which I think they are crucial. Firstly, there's the value of solidarity. Solidarity is a fundamental glue for any society and, of course, for us Europeans. Solidarity was very important in our all fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And today, solidarity is very important for the people in Ukraine. It's a disaster. It was one of the largest disaster, this criminal war, with elements of genocide, and we all could not imagine that something like that could happen in Europe again after 1945. And especially for me, being a German, it's difficult to say that. And it's also obvious that culture and heritage are targets in this war. Not only the identity, the right of the Ukrainians to be a nation and all this, but also the people, of course. This is the worst losses. The people are always the worst losses. But cultural heritage is a target. This is clear, and the commissioner mentioned it. I mean, it's very important that we think about what we can do for the endangered heritage in Ukraine. Of course, the commissioner also talked about not only speaking, but acting. What we can do, Europa Nostra, we have some concrete actions, and many institutions, organizations, states, the European Union. There's happening a lot, also from my organization, where I'm normally responsible for. We're doing a lot for, or trying to do a lot for, and with Ukraine. But also Europa Nostra. Europa Nostra organized the first ever crowdfunding campaign, you know about that, in close cooperation with the Global Heritage Fund. And I'm very happy to welcome also a representative of the Global Heritage Fund here in Prague today and yesterday with us. So you see the attraction of Europa Nostra, even from the United States. You're coming to be with us. Be very welcome. I think this cooperation has potential for more, and I think it's very important to show this solidarity in a global dimension. In a few weeks, we gathered for 50,000 euro, and you heard about it already. The Aleph organization doubled this amount, and with this amount, we could finance fellowships for 125 Ukrainian cultural heritage defenders. I think this was very important that we find this kind of format to support the people there and to show our solidarity. And of course, we want to go on, and for all this, we need your help and the help of many others. Second value, the value of peace. Europe, and this Europe, especially the European Union, has risen from the ashes of devastating wars and destruction in Europe. They are like a lead line going through our European history over centuries, if not millennia. And there is once a day should come that we must show that we learned from our history. There are still, unfortunately, some people left who did not learn the lesson from history. And then with war and force and violence, you are not changing nothing for better, only for worse. And at the very end, believe me, also for Russia, it will be worse. European reconciliation and integration is crucial. And today, more than ever, if we, for the actual happenings in Eastern Europe, we can see. And Europa Nostra is convinced that cultural heritage is an important power for a green and peaceful society and for a peace between peoples and countries. Cultural heritage makes history and historic and cultural entanglements understandable. And I think this is also important in the fight against so-called scientific, but of course, lies. Saying that Ukraine has not the right to be a nation, has not a right to speak about its culture is, well, it's crazy, and simply scientifically, it's wrong. Of course, we are all entangled. Ukrainian culture and history is always entangled with Russia, with Poland. All Europeans, we are entangled, with Germans, with so many, as we are surrounded by many countries. This is a strong side of our history. But entanglement never can be an argument against your identity. I think this must be very clear, and we all, which we know heritage, we know history, we know culture, have to find against this really stupid simplification. And the cultural heritage I mentioned already is under constant threat of destruction. And there's one element that the commissioner mentioned, illicit trafficking. We do talk a lot about, and it's important, about the destructions. And there is a website on the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture and Information where you can see culture crimes, I think it's called, where you can follow day by day the growing number of destroyed museums, libraries, churches, monasteries, historic buildings, historic city centers, and so on. Of course, this is horrifying. But there's also a growing tendency for illicit trafficking of stolen cultural heritage passing the borders. I read recently in a British newspaper there must be an exhibition in the British Museum of a treasure, medieval treasure from Ukraine, which the British customs luckily confiscated at the border. And I do not want to know how many other things leave the country illegally. And unfortunately, we have experience with that. What is now happening in Ukraine happened before in Syria, happened before in Iraq, in other countries, in the Balkans. I think the question is also, when can we finally have a plan and a strategy to find this bringing cultural heritage more and more on the battlefield? We need a strategy and a plan for protecting cultural heritage, because I have the feeling, and last year I published a book on intentional destruction of heritage from the antiquity to modern times. It was, of course, before the war of Ukraine. And there's a red line. And I have the feeling in the late 20th and beginning of the 21st century it becomes more and more that cultural heritage is getting a target. It's not only Ukraine, but it's clear. It's clear. I mean, look at what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. Look what happened in Syria by the ISIS and so on. Go back to what happened in Yugoslavia. It is a target in these thoughts against people, because it's a fight against people. There are not wars to conquer and so on between countries. It's really a war to destroy. And of course, cultural heritage, this may be something positive, is too strong. So they have to destroy it, because otherwise cultural heritage you never can neglect, because it tells the story, the history, which is written in stones. And also the cohesive power of culture and cultural heritage is or should impact not only inside Europe, but also beyond. We have many problems in Europe, but of course Europe is not a fortress or an island. And therefore Europa Nostra launches a plea to EU leaders and institutions for a global heritage partnership. Because even to have a good plan and strategy how to fight against the destruction of heritage, we have really to have a global alliance. This is very important. And including Western Balkans, the Near East, Africa, the Mediterranean never was a border. And whereas the eastern border of Europe goes far beyond what we call Europe. And also parts of Africa, especially in the last years, we have a upcoming debate in Germany, France, Britain about the colonial legacy of our collections, of our institutions. And we started cooperations. In my institution, cooperations of restitutions, but then also working together, helping in the countries, and not only giving things back as the end of the story, giving things back if they've taken by force, but then seeing it as the beginning of a story in all our partners. If in Brazil or in Nigeria or in Angola, wherever, they see it also as a beginning. I think it's very important that Europe also, there's also a legacy from our history. We have to find an answer, or we have also to find a strategy for a new relation with the global South, which so much suffered from Europeans in the last centuries as well. And the third and final value, beauty and sustainability. Our cultural heritage, and we heard a lot about that. Each one of the speakers talked about it. Logical, it's one of the big challenges beside Ukraine. But it's a fact that our cultural heritage is also endangered by climate change. And therefore, green transformations are crucial and climate actions are more than needed. Europa Nostra sent an important message by publishing last year the European Cultural Heritage Green Paper, which was set up by Europa Nostra together with ICOMOS, and again, thank you so much, with support of the European Investment Bank Institute. And Europa Nostra has an important role as co-chair of the Climate Heritage Network for Europe, and we are and this is very important for our role in the huge international conferences in Glasgow, in the upcoming climate conferences in Mexico, Mondiacult, and in Egypt, COP27. We believe that the European Union is pursuing the most comprehensive framework worldwide for climate action. I'm sorry that the Commissioner cannot hear this. This was addressed towards her because I'm convinced that the European Union is doing an excellent work in this field. The European Green Deal, the new European Bauhaus, I think the European Union really becomes a green leader also in the worldwide dimension. And in all these fields, culture is present, as the Commissioner you could convince you by yourself just listening to what the Commissioner said. Dear all, to conclude, we want a Europe of solidarity, peace and sustainability and beauty because we need it urgently. We're living in a very vulnerable world and somehow it becomes more and more vulnerable and therefore this is so important. And for this we have to rediscover and care for our common ground, for our shared fundament, our fundament of history and culture, and this is focusing in the cultural heritage. And we have to unleash the power of our shared cultural heritage. Then, also it's a little bit emotional, but only then Europe really can advance beyond being a pure network of interests. But we have to develop a stronger sense what it means being European and being together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hermann. Yet and now, wow, speech. Thank you so much because it was so full of strong conviction and strong emotions, which the times that we are living deserve, and all based on your immense experience. Academic and very practical as also president of the Prussian Heritage Foundation, because on the daily basis you are dealing with all these issues, and it is really a privilege for us to have you as our leader, as our executive president. So so we will now just make I just wanted one thing to mention before we give the floor also to the young voice before the first panel. And the Commissioner and you spoke also very strongly about the climate action and climate change challenge, and we will have the panel dedicated. As we speak, Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, who is responsible for the European Green Deal, is in Prague. He is now talking to the mayors of European cities in Prague, and the mayor of Athens, who was with us, is there, and he will join us here. So we did our utmost to get Frans Timmermans here as well in order to make that bridge. It was not possible, but we will make sure that with the Commissioner and also Johanna Leisner is here with us, we need to build a much stronger connection with the leader, Frans Timmermans, Ursula von der Leyen. European Union must be leading, already is leading, but culture is still not sufficiently present in all, not only narrative, but in action. So together, it will be definitely one of the follow-ups of our discussion, but you have in your, all the values, you have put them together, so thank you so much. And now, we will have the first of what we call youth intermezzo. It's a sort of a creative invention of our Prague Agora. It's European Year of the Youth. We have a lot of young people, participants in Prague because of the also future East Heritage Summit here. And so before we want to make a young person, a young heritage champion, will make a bridge, in fact, between what we have just been saying and the next panel. And as you know in the program, the next panel is dedicated to Ukraine, mobilizing forces and voices in solidarity with cultural heritage in Ukraine. And now we have someone that every one of you have cheered last night. She's now in another dress, also inspired by the intangible heritage of Ukraine, Lesia Voroniuk, the winner of the Public Choice Award 2022 for the World Vyshyvanka Day.
Dear colleagues, thank you a lot. One more time, I want to thank for supporting Ukraine. And it's really great honor for the Ukrainian delegation to participate in today's discussion. Reward our 16 years of work with the European Heritage Award, Europa Nostra Award, is a motivation to work even harder. The World Vyshyvanka Day, as you know, I hope know, is an international holiday dedicated to preserving embroidered shirt Vyshyvanka as a material and spiritual heritage of Ukrainian people. Our organization has implemented more than 70 large-scale projects in Ukraine and abroad. But now our main task is to protect culture heritage as much as possible. Since February, we have been evacuating private collections from combat zone, and since February, more than 500 objects of tangible culture heritage in Ukraine have been seriously damaged or destroyed by the troops of Russian Federation. We realized that culture heritage is much more significant and has much more defensive functions than we thought. Culture heritage gives answer to key question, who are we, and what we are ready to do to protect the most valuable. This is a fixed way of thinking and values. And the ongoing war is a war of identities and values. Culture heritage is a mark of civilization and democracy. Totalitarianism destroys any rights of cultural diversity and offers a perverted value system survived by killing, die for a tyrant. Ukrainians have grown increasingly interested in history and our own culture. And I will give just one example about World Vyshyvanka Day this year. It was May 19, a period of very active and brutal war. And at first we decided that any events would be inappropriate. But the demand for the promotion was huge. We did not announce large-scale events, but Ukrainians and solidarity with Ukrainian people in every country, in every city, dressed embroidered shirts and went to the release. We organized a big campaign, present an embroidered shirt to a defender. And even the Ukrainian defenders at the front in the trancheas wore embroidered shirts this day. There is a well-known saying, when the cannons roar, the muses are silent. Obviously, it's not about Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian artists. Ukrainian culture figures are as active as possible now. Despite the remoteness of the conditions for research and creativity and even minimal needs due to the houses destroyed by the Russians, Ukrainians produce today a considerable cultural heritage of the wartime. Today we have a new folk heroic epic and it's actively being formed in Ukraine. Thousands of poems, hundreds of songs, painting, posters, screenplays, and the main characters are our soldiers, doctors, and volunteers. A new wave of mobilization of soldiers has just been announced in Russia. Of course, the conquest of Ukraine is not the ultimate goal of the enemy, it's much deeper. Penetration into the Middle Europe of Europe, Russia is trying to restore the borders of the Soviet culture and mental occupation. As evidence, armed conflicts provoked by Russia in Moldova, Georgia, and other countries. That's why it's necessary to continue to chancel Russian culture, because consuming a Russian culture product means to fund the war in Ukraine and in Europe. Culture heritage is a memory about 5 of predecessors. Ukrainians fought during the entire period of Soviet occupation. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian culture figures were shot or deported. But this story did not break us. It strengthened the spiritual backbone of the Ukrainian people. We remember the heroic writers of the 20th and 30s of the 20th century, and Polish publicist Jerzy Hedroic called them short Renaissance. Or we remember the strong-willed position of the culture figures, fearless dissidents of 60s. And how does Ukrainian culture protect Ukraine today? Not just spiritual, but also physically. For example, a painting by the Ukrainian artist Mariya Gabriel was sold for 500,000 euros, and more than 20 vehicles for the army were bought with these funds. Or the stamp Russian warship was sold for 5 million hryvnias. Our organization started to producing Vyshyvankas now, and which we used to buy bulletproof vests and ambulances. So it how look like job of culture curators now in Ukraine. And that means Ukrainians will not surrender under any conditions. During the war, we don't stop and continue our work in cultural heritage, and we are creating our biggest top project, Museum of Ukrainian Vyshyvanka. And I hope our Public Choice Award will be very helpful to work, and I want to say thanks one more time for this award. This museum is very important now because it aims to present Vyshyvanka, Ukrainian Vyshyvanka, and garments of every European country in several value plans as a highly aesthetic works and as spiritual and national symbols. Also, I want to say thank to colleagues and to projects that we saw last days, because we became a lot of very interesting and professional information, and we become a lot of new partnerships. And tomorrow, I hope we will be at home in Ukraine, and we will start work with all these contacts. So we are open to exchange of the experience working in extreme conditions, partnerships, and new projects. And thank you one more time.
Thank you so much, Lesia, for having been the voice of the young generation, the voice of the Ukrainian cultural heritage this morning, and making the bridge to the first panel. And I would now like to hand over the moderation to my dear partner and friend, Nada Hosking, Executive Director of Global Heritage Fund, and she will be moderating this important panel, and you will invite, I think, the other panelists to join you. Thank you for coming from the United States, dear Nada, to be with us in Prague.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all today for the European Heritage Policy Agora. I would like to begin by thanking Sneska, of course, Europa Nostra, my colleagues at Seven Most Endangered, the European Commission, the Ministry of Culture of Czech Republic, for welcoming us all for the European Cultural Heritage Summit. It is a true honor to be joined on stage by 4 panelists who, along with their colleagues, are making an outstanding effort to support Ukraine's cultural heritage through emergency and long-term responsiveness of different kinds. Today's discussion on mobilizing forces and voices in solidarity of Ukraine's cultural heritage could not be more timely or salient. The past 7 months have seen unspeakable damage and suffering in Ukraine, with no evidence of the war letting up as we approach the winter months. For 7 months, Ukraine's cultural identity has been on the brink of erasement. 192, as of 6 days ago, 192 cultural sites have been verified by UNESCO as damaged or destroyed in Ukraine. In the Donetsk region alone, they have seen 56 damaged sites. Monuments, religious sites, museums, historic buildings, and libraries alike have all fallen victim to destruction. The international annihilation of irreplaceable artworks, artifacts, historical sites, and their stewards is a desperate attempt to erase collective history. The people of Ukraine are risking their lives to protect and safeguard their cultural identity. Ukraine's relentless cultural sector, with dedicated and brave workers who are currently protecting Ukrainian cultural heritage and art, need us with them in solidarity as they continue their civic activism. This morning, we will be discussing these efforts and learning more about the important work that is taking place on the ground in Ukraine, as well as the swift mobilization and global communities that are working together to support their efforts. With us today for the first panel of the European Heritage Policy Agora, we have Dr. Maja Kominko, the Scientific and Program Director of ALIF, the International Alliance for Protection of Heritage in Conflict Areas. Sanne Letschert, the Head of Cultural Emergency Response at the Prince Claus Fund. Ihor Poshyvailo, the Director of the Maidan Museum in Kyiv and Coordinator of Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, HERI. Robert Piaskowski, the Plenipotentiary of the Mayor of Krakow for Culture and Director of Strategic Development in the Department of Culture and National Heritage of the City of Krakow. But before we begin our panel discussion, I would like to invite Oksana Lyniv to the rostrum. Oksana is a Ukrainian conductor and winner of the 2022 Helena Vaz da Silva European Award for raising public awareness of cultural heritage. In addition to her international career and many achievements and accolades, Oksana is a passionate advocate for classical music in Ukraine and serves as Ukraine's cultural ambassador to the world. Please join me in welcoming Oksana.
So hello everybody. I prepared a short video about my current projects now in Ukraine and also internationally. It was a fantastic 5 years, a fantastic 5 festivals, joint projects, exhibitions, research work, and on 24th February, the world was turned upside down. Everything we had lived for, everything we had tried to build up during those 30 years of independence faced an existential risk. When you are here, you are safe, but you realize that every day people are dying, and all we can do is to speak up about this every day, to remind the world. The 24th of February was a shock for us. My first thoughts were of the Youth Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine. These are youths gathered at my initiative in one group from different cities and towns of Ukraine. We have managed to organize a music camp in Ljubljana with our partners, the Slovenian Youth Orchestra, where we managed to transport almost 160 people. These were young musicians from Ukraine, together with their little brothers and sisters, and often with their mothers. And from the very first rehearsals, from the very first sound of music, there was a certain confidence and concentration in their eyes. At that moment, music was only link that brought them back to the past before the war. It was the only thread that connected them to their parents, to their destroyed music academies, to their childhoods. The voices of these youths will become very important in showing the world that we are an European nation with own culture, and this is nothing to kill us for. Thank you very much. Thank you to all European countries, institutions, state and public initiatives for supporting Ukraine in these difficult times. Now you saw a short excerpt from the current film project we will show the premiere on 1st of October, very symbolic date for us because this is the International Day of Music. And I really believe, as conductor coming from Ukraine, but representing in the international world, big international world, I really believe in the big meaning of culture and the music to combine, to break the border and to make us, to link us to better humanity and to better society. So from my start, my goal was not only become a successful conductor, but also with my growing career to make Ukrainian culture more representing in the world. So I am very honored to be a Ukrainian woman conductor who is also an example for breaking the stereotypes for the role of women in the world, in our society. So I am the first woman conductor who was invited to conduct in famous Richard Wagner Festival in Bayreuth for this 230 history. But also I am the first woman conductor who is now currently music director in Teatro Comunale di Bologna in Italy, and also I am coming now directly from the rehearsal where now I am leading my first opera premiere, Andrea Chenier. And Andrea Chenier opera is about the French Revolution, and French Revolution is very important historical period to start Europa to fight for the democracy values. And in this moment, I would like also to speak about important figure like Olympe de Gouges. She wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women and of the Female Citizen from 1791, and she was executed by guillotine during the terror. And she wrote very important sentence: if the woman has the right to go to scaffold, she should also have the same rights to stand on the podium. And so I really want to express my big admiration also to Sneska and to Europa Nostra for fighting for better Europa, for all values like equality, like diversity, and also really solidarity. In the name of Ukrainian Youth Orchestra, on the very first day of war, we gave an international call to cultural institutions all over the world to hear us and to come together to support Ukraine. And thanks to our partners and thanks to financial support and also partnership, for example, with Bundesjugend Orchestra, we could organize in Slovenian evacuation camp together with our partners, Slovenian Youth Orchestra, led by Živa Piol-Peruš. We organized this camp where we evacuated more than 160 people. And after this, we organized also a big tour for the 4 months where we organized a concert in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and we did more than 30 concerts and 10 important festivals of Europe, like Bach Festival Leipzig, Beethoven Festival in Bonn, Lucerne Festival, Munich Opera Festival, and many more. Also, the festival Lviv Mozart, this is co-founded and initiated by me. This is a festival dedicated to our cultural heritage because this is very interesting historical fact that the youngest son of Mozart, Franz Xaver Mozart, spent in Lviv, in Galician, 30 very successful years as a conductor, as pianist and composer, and founder of important music association in Lviv. But this fact that Ukraine has directly connections to most important composers' family, like Mozart family, was not very good known in Ukraine. And so 2017, I founded the festival, Lviv Mozart Festival, and immediately from the first year of beginning, we are doing actively partnership with most important institution in Austria. This is Foundation Mozarteum in Salzburg. And this year, with the beginning of war, we organized a very important project, this film, Mozart of Solidarity, where we invited 8 important Ukrainian artists to Salzburg, and we are discovering together a rare repertoire composed more than 200 years in Lviv by Franz Xaver Mozart, but also by his student, female composer as Julia von Cavalcabo, one of first women composers in Austria, and we recorded these works on historical instruments by Mozart's family, but also other historical instruments. Between performing music pieces, every artist is speaking about their war experience and about their future plans in this difficult wartime. But the goals and the mission of Festival Mozart was to celebrate the historical and cultural connections between Ukraine and the West Europa. In every year, I have organized important projects in remarkable historical places, as for example, Brody Synagogue. This is destroyed synagogue, one of biggest synagogues in East Europa, which now is ruined. And I am coming from Brody. I was born in Brody, and also Brody is the native town for Josef Roth, famous Austrian writer. So I organized a big event in front of ruin of this synagogue to dedicate to Joseph wrote, but also to all Jewish victims during the Second War. But also like opera production in Svirch Castle, this is 16th century castle in Galician, to drive attention to historical monument and to drive attention to protect this. I am so happy doing the music, and because it unites us in our common values and hopes for the future. I am happy to receive the Helena Vasta Silva European Award for my activities. But while conducting special pieces or musical excerpts, I still feel myself very deeply involved in the idea about the global meaning of arts. I believe that music and culture heritage are the best instruments for diplomacy and international understanding and exchange all over the world. Support creative youth via investing in our better future with more justice, freedom, and diversity. Each world culture is a priceless treasure that we have to preserve, protect, and stand for. I would like to dedicate this prize to my colleagues, to my team who is working now in very difficult situation in Ukraine. And I would like to say again, thank you for helping us to realize our dream for have peaceful future and to save our country, to save to save our youth, to have a dream to become a member of European Union and to celebrate Ukrainian culture as a part of big global culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oksana, for the beautiful and emotional speech. Very empowering. I'm getting emotional as well. I want to invite my colleagues to come to the stage so we can start our panel conversation. As someone who has been in the front lines, mobilizing, lending your voice, actively working to protect cultural heritage of Ukraine, tell us about the impact of the war on the cultural sector, and how you have been able to leverage international support, and what is still needed in order to achieve your goals.
Good morning. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today and to share some experience, emotions, and maybe lessons for the future, because Ukraine today is experiencing, unfortunately, something unique, and I hope due to this situation, not only Ukraine, but the whole world should become much more resilient. We spoke a lot today about sustainability, but resilience in this situation when we are facing disasters, when we are facing wars, different conflicts, resilience is one of the keywords, at least for Ukraine today. We've heard a lot about the scale of destruction. There is statistics, but there are a lot of hundreds of stories which on the one hand makes us very proud of our cultural heritage and bring us hope that Ukraine will stand, will survive, will win. And we are so grateful for the fantastic expressions of solidarity. We have a lot of mottos like Heritage in Action, Solidarity in Action, and in fact in Ukraine today we feel this solidarity in action in everyday life, in every day when we try to protect the cultural heritage in this very extreme and unexpected situation for us. First of all, maybe practically, my personal experience. I got the question, as well as a lot of hundreds of my colleagues from cultural heritage sector, from international organizations, from friends abroad, how we can help you. Simple question, but so hard to answer immediately. To answer this question, we self-organized and launched the voluntarily initiative, which we named HERI, Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, because we wanted to understand what's going on. First days, we acted mostly driven by intuition, because we didn't know what to do. The war started in 2014, and due to the international support, like Prince Claus Fund programs, ICROM programs, First Aid to Cultural Heritage, we got some knowledge. We participated in training programs. We do a lot of exercises, but it was a theory. And we faced a very cruel practice since full-scale invasion in February 2022. And so we self-organized and launched a survey, the national survey. We tried to understand what's going on all over Ukraine and on the ground. And it was not easy, because the front line is over 1,000 kilometers. The war actions were very dynamic. The occupation in some regions were very immediate. A lot of my colleagues, for example, they were ready to respond. They packed their collections. They preserved or copied their documents. They cared about their staff. But in a few hours, for example, in Donetsk region, in Luhansk region, immediate intervention. And all those packed collection remained non-evacuated. But I know examples of my colleagues when they stayed 1 month during occupation, trying to find the possibility not to escape themselves, but to evacuate museum, archive, library collections. So we self-organized, and due to international support, it is worthwhile to name Ali Foundation, Prince Claus Fund, Sarah, Cultural Emergency Response Program, a lot of ministers of cultures, including the Minister of Culture of the Czech Republic, Europa Nostra. Also, we've heard about this fantastic support for individuals, which is named Scholarship for Solidarity. And Harry is very proud to be a partner of this very important help. So we surveyed the needs, and we just tried to act according to the needs. Evacuation of collections, not only outside, but inside the buildings, inside the premises, safe allocation. So international museums, organizations, foundations provided packaging materials, which Ukraine lacked badly. Protection equipment, generators, drying, whatever else needed later, also provided to Ukraine. Then we started field expeditions to the damaged regions to make assessment of damage and risks, because we need to understand what should be done. And due to this, we implemented international methodology worked out by ICROM. Right now we have the mobile application. We collected the database, which help us to identify priorities and to react not on a tactical level, but on strategical, because we would like not only to act today, we think what will be tomorrow. So we prepare for early recovery and for post-war reconstruction. And a lot of efforts were invested on international, on national level. Ukrainian government initiated the National Council of Reconstruction, and I'm happy to be a member of it, like Katerina and our HERI group. So we strategize a lot, and what should be done in this situation? I think that we should engage as much as possible international expertise, especially from those countries who faced the social situation mentioned here, who survived not only war conflicts, but disasters. And we have fantastic examples, for example, from Haiti, or Smithsonian Institution one of the main partners, is also very helpful. I should also mention, it is to respond effectively, we should understand what's going on. And monitoring the situation is very, very helpful. And Virginia Laboratory of the Satellite Monitoring is very helpful in this, because we can understand what's going on over 30,000 cultural objects, movable collections, immovable monuments, historical buildings. And also it is important for us not to document the damage, not to assess damage and the risk, but also to collect facts about the crimes of Russia against culture. Because we plan today the future international tribunal, because protecting culture, we cannot leave all the crimes non-punished. This is very important for us. And also mentioned today restitution issues, very important. ICOM is one of our main partners. We produced a red list of the most endangered cultural heritage, and this red list is disseminated to Interpol, to customs, to auction houses. This is also one of the most important directions what should be done by international community to help us. Also, raising awareness and promoting Ukrainian culture is very crucial. Because today, and I'm very happy that we speak not only about rebuilding what was damaged, we are planning modernization of Ukrainian culture. It's a big chance for us. It's a big opportunity, not just to reconstruct as it was before. We plan that our cultural, contemporary culture and cultural heritage will be modernized and will be accessible to the rest of the world. Because today, as mentioned so many times during these days, we are fighting not only for our territory, not only for some political ambitions. We are fighting for Ukrainian cultural identity. This is a heritage war. But we are also defending international values. We are protecting culture of the European countries. And finally, because I know I'm limited in time, let me remind one very interesting fact. In 1961, Kremlin dictator Nikita Khrushchev said that Kremlin will no doubt to destroy Acropolis by Russian missiles if needed to achieve Moscow goals. And that time, Prime Minister of Greece answered that Moscow Kremlin can destroy historical monument, physical space, but will never destroy the ideas of solidarity, of democracy, of human rights, which disseminated worldwide from that place. Similar today we are facing in Ukraine. We are fighting for our future, but also we are trying to stop the Russian aggression from emancipation to the rest of the world. So this is really a heritage war, and we are fighting for our values as it was in Maidan. I'm director of Maidan Museum, and the Maidan protests were the biggest civil protests in the European history. And according to Timothy Snyder, American historian, Ukrainian Euromaidan actualized ideas of European Union for European nations. This is very important, that Ukrainians were ready to die for European values 8 years ago and are dying today. Thank you so much for this fantastic support, and together we surely will win. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihor. Robert, I think it would be great if you can paint a picture for us about the effort that took place since the start of war, considering that Krakow is at the center of international supports for Ukraine. What are challenges that you faced managing the influx of aid for cultural heritage and other type of aids? And if you can share with us in terms of how can we, as a community in this space, how can we do better to avoid duplicating efforts, and the beginning of the conflicts was a little bit challenging.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for invitation, especially to demonstrate also the consistency of the city of Kraków with Europa Nostra values, goals, and being proud to announce here in Prague the establishment of Europa Nostra Heritage Hub, which we expect in Kraków will be a very important actor in providing help and networking also professionals from different heritage sectors in our part of Europe, but also from Ukraine. Yes, indeed, Kraków was an interesting case, is an interesting case of shelter city which has not been prepared at all to host in few days million or even 2 million refugees passing through the city, and nowadays hosting almost 250,000 refugees from Ukraine. And I think there is no other cities in the world which could be prepared for such a thing, which could respond in such a complex way from bottom up. Actually, all of the inhabitants of the city of Kraków, deputy mayors, city workers, everyone was involved in providing immediate response to, of course, firstly on the humanitarian level, but then we quickly discovered that humanitarian aid is inseparably, it's not separated from the aid for heritage. That's why a mayor of Kraków very quickly has called all of the member cities of Organization of World Heritage Cities to act and to provide immediate response to Ukrainian heritage organizations. It was also the response to Iyana Onyszczenko appeal to Polish conservatory officers, services to provide concrete materials, concrete help to protect heritage of Lviv firstly, but also Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Kiev, Odessa. And at the very beginning, this help was very spontaneous, very chaotic. Of course, it has not had any priority in comparison to humanitarian aid. How we could use the same trucks or trams whereas human aid or medicines or even military aid was in priority. So structurization and institutionalization of the aid was very important, especially that many organizations from abroad, international foundations, funds, international United Nations agendas came to Kraków and wanted to establish some headquarters, some hub centers, and it was very important to navigate all of this. And I wanted to say something very important. It would not work if we would not have before a huge diaspora of Ukrainians living and contributing to Krakow's everyday life, economy, culture, including cultural associations, NGO, because they were the first organizations able to intervene, translate, navigate, help, to bring also specific materials from Ukraine to Poland. For example, the story of the transport of 10 tons of books for kids. Such a beautiful story. Someone can write one day's film script for how it was complicated and and important to explain customs that books are equally important that medical care in the other way. So in total, there were almost 200 trucks sent to Ukraine, 1,000 tons of different goods, and the total aid distributed by the city of Kraków was 122 million Polish zlotych, which is 125 million euros. And all of the cultural sector engaged, involved, from all of the museums, particular help, expertises, experts' willingness to go to Ukraine to assist, then theaters providing residency, cultural institutions employing artists from Ukraine. It was very quick that we've invited from different Ukrainian cities orchestras, choirs, ballet, and also writers, intellectuals. But of course, most of them, they said, we want to fight, we want to stay in Ukraine. We have mission here, we would like to testimony here in Poland, in Europe, but we need to go back to struggle for our country. And then, of course, other institutions on the national level emerged. For example, House of Reconstruction of Ukraine established in Warsaw. Of course, it refers to House of Reconstruction of Warsaw after World War II. It's a platform of a collaboration between conservatory and restaurators of Poland with Ukrainian colleagues. Then, of course, Center of Assistance for Culture, established by National Institute of Heritage, which is providing different help and being in contact with almost 100 institutions in Ukraine and also representing Ukrainian heritage on the political level, also in conversation with World Heritage Committee or UNESCO. And then, of course, all of the other projects like scanning, like collection of money through OWHC network, presenting our Central and Eastern Europe sensitivity. In Canada a few weeks ago, that was very important to listen to Mayor of Dubrovnik, just watching pictures from Kiev, from Kharkiv, from Mariupol, saying at the front of the 300 cities from all of the continents, this is how Dubrovnik looked like 30 years ago. And we celebrate here 30th anniversary of inscription of city of Prague on the UNESCO list, and 31 years ago 70% of Dubrovnik was destroyed. So we should learn from this experience and also the contribution of Croatia Polish experts' experience in reconstruction of Warsaw after World War II might be very interesting, important. And just to conclude, because of course I don't want to go too much into the details, but just to give you some comparison, the total aid provided in figures by City of Kraków is like 1/3 of the total budget for culture we spent in Kraków. We think it's not enough, and it was important at the very first stage of the war. But now our duty is also to help Ukrainian culture to foster, to survive. That's why we finance many cultural projects, educational projects. There is a beautiful program by UNICEF. We've just started with Krakow schools. City of Kraków employed almost 1,000 teachers to provide education for almost 10,000 kids and 12,000 students from Ukraine. And this is important. And if I may answer last question from you, what will be the future? The future belongs to networks, because we could not help Ukraine alone from the city, municipal level, without NGO, without Ukrainian diaspora, without Polish conservatory officers, it would not be possible. So now I need to say that also thanks to ALIF, Prince Claus funds and all of the national institutions, cultural institutions, International Cultural Center of Krakow, that was already beautiful, beautiful network, and Europa Nostra is one of them as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. My next question is for both of you, Sanne and Maja. You both have organizations that have a mechanism to handle response, emergency response. But the wars, the countries where you have worked in the past are a little bit further away from Europe. How has this particular instance been different?
Me first? Yeah, this one. Thank you, Nada. Yeah, that is true. Usually our emergency mechanism is only deployed in countries that are much further away than from home. But in essence, I think the mechanism has not changed that much. We've been operating in Ukraine since the beginning of, or the escalation of the war, actually, and we were able to mobilize networks because we already had them there and act quickly. So we've been able to offer very quick and flexible support to partners on the ground who we already knew and were already trained, like, for example, Ihor and the Harry Initiative. And what I do think is something new that was possible was increased partnerships and new partnerships. Because it was closer to home, I do think there was increased awareness also of the importance of protection of culture in crisis situations and especially in conflict. Also with organizations who maybe did not think of that necessarily before as one of an urgent action or a priority. That is there. So I think that that collaboration was very important. That also showed in, I think, a best practice, I can now, I think, call it, of different heritage organizations pooling funding resources. So we were 5 different heritage organizations, usually operating internationally. We're now pooling funding to support first aid actions in Ukraine. I think that leads to a much more effective way of supporting projects on the ground. Also, more easier way for partners on the ground to navigate where they can get resources. Because in a conflict situation that is difficult to do, especially when there's so many institutions that want to help and assist. So that coordination, I think, was very important. However, I do think we can also, there's room for improvement there. As you already mentioned, it was quite difficult to coordinate from the beginning because there were so many people who wanted to help and to assist. And I think as a field we can really do an effort also in advance to streamline that coordination mechanism and the way we respond. And I think another important point that was already made is also how it signaled that cultural heritage is in fact, and protection is a humanitarian issue. And that increased awareness of that fact also enabled for some humanitarian mechanisms and corridors to open for cultural relief, which in the past that was not so easy to make that case. So, for example, additional funding that coming from DG ECHO is one of the first times actually that cultural relief funds were made available through that funding source. And I think the case of Ukraine and how it's visible that it's also about that culture and identity are so intrinsically involved in this war is a very important case to make. And I hope that also with all of us here we can keep making that case, and that also cultural protection should be embedded in envelopes that are maybe not necessarily only dedicated to culture, but also in reconstruction envelopes, for example, or building. And I think, and it's horrible to say, but that it's closer to home made it more visible that that is actually a necessity.
Yeah. Maja? Do you want to tell us a little bit how this particular intervention in Ukraine was different for Alif than others?
Thank you, Nada, and thank you, Sanne. I mean, I agree with everything that Sanne said, but maybe a little bit the viewpoint from Alif. We normally work in Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, and we normally work in places where the war has been present for a while. The emotional response is very hard, but this is different. This was additional shock because of all the evil wars that are completely unnecessary. This one certainly was evil and completely, shock to us all, despite the obvious signs as we now think. We have started working in Ukraine. Within a week, we had agreement from our board for the first envelope. Within 2 weeks, we had 30 grants in Ukraine, and that was possible. We now have, as you see, 130. We have committed an envelope of 3 million so far. We need to recognize European Union, who gave us 2 million euros for our actions in Ukraine. But all that and I would like to say effective action was possible for only one reason, and that was the network, as Robert said, and this is twofold. There was a network of absolutely wonderful professionals in Ukraine, with high expertise, highly dedicated, and with great solidarity. Every single museum that we contacted put us in touch with their colleagues. There was a lot of mutual support. But there was also an incredible support from colleagues in Poland, and Robert among them, but not only, Polonika Foundation, Agata Wąsowska, who is somewhere here in the room, our colleague Michał Krasuski from Warsaw, just to mention the few, also the Andrzej Betlej from Wawel Castle. It was their response and they complete selfless support to what we were doing was beyond anything we had any right to expect or ask. But also the fact that this was, Ukraine is part of Europe. These networks, this was one network. They were very much embedded. People knew each other. People were engaged in conversations before. So that made, in this horrible, tragic situation, it made it much easier. And there was also great leadership from within the system. Of course, Ihor, Katarina, but also, I'm sorry, this is a little bit like a Oscar speech, but I do need to thank some people. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Milena Chorna, Katarina, I already mentioned you. Also, Aleksandra Kowalczuk from Odessa, Mihailo Zakopec from Lviv, and many, many others. And I'm sorry I can't list all of them. But the pattern was always very clear. We were in contact with one institution, and they immediately put us in contact with their network. There was clear coordination. I also need to recognize our international partners, because we work a lot with ECOM especially, but also with museums in Switzerland, in France, in Italy, and in Austria. I think that we pretty quickly emptied these countries of wooden crates, which were requested in large amounts. But to know where to send them and when where they're most needed, because they were needed everywhere, but one has to prioritize. And that wouldn't be possible without the guidance of people like Ihor. So we're very grateful, and whatever useful thing we managed to do, that was really thanks to them, and also thanks to my wonderful team. We have a very small team of 6 people, and we have 150 projects all over the world, but 4 people, or 2 people from the main team and 2 Ukrainian colleagues that we employed are full-time on Ukraine, and we try to provide support not only through grants, but also through connecting people, connecting expertise. And we, so far, as we tap to our international network, not once did we hear, no, I can't do this, I don't have time. It was usually, of course, I'm happy to help, and please let us know what more can I do. So there is a great solidarity, but this comes also from the example, inspiring example of selflessness of professionals in Ukraine.
Thank you. So $3 million spent, over 130 projects. You've been leading the charge in Ukraine. How do you think your interventions are going to evolve?
I think they're going, well, I mean, it depends how the situation on the ground evolves. But one of the things that we, in this very unpredictable situation, one thing that we can predict is winter. So we are certainly talking to our colleagues in Ukraine to see how we can strengthen the storage, because things were stored in safe places, but they are not always adapted necessarily for winter conditions. So we are helping with this. We are also helping with stabilization of the buildings, stabilization so that they are not damaged by snow, by rains. And we are, everyone who is on this stage is already involved in discussions on this. So it's not that it's a whole group of coalition of organizations. We do work closely together. And we also will continue, and Nada, you know this, we'll continue working. We hope to continue to support wonderful Ukrainian professionals. We were delighted to work with Europe and Austria and with the Global Heritage Fund on fellowships. And we are delighted to see inspiring examples of people who receive these fellowships, because sometimes it is difficult to work 7 days a week and long hours, but when we receive feedback and when we see who it is that we are helping, that really makes us all unproblematic and well worth it, and gives new energy. It really makes our work meaningful. So thank you to you all.
Thank you. And my last question is going to be for Oksana. Your career is incredible, and what you have been doing since the war broke out is short of amazing. What are your next projects? Can you share with us?
So, how I said, on 14th of October, I will conduct the premiere of Andrea Chenier in Teatro Comunale di Bologna, where I am music director, and it will be my first opera premiere in Italy, so it's very important. And on the end of October, I will lead symphonic program also in Bologna and introduce to Italian public the music by Ukrainian composer, so Boris Liatoshinsky, his third symphony, but also I will conduct the premiere of modern piece by modern Ukrainian composer Eduard Rezach. And after is my USA debut in Los Angeles Opera with Tosca. Yes, it's supposed to be already to COVID, but it was cancelled in Seattle Opera, so next is Los Angeles. And also numerous projects with Youth Symphony of Ukraine. We will play in Berlin, Concerthaus Berlin in November, and also in Paris in the frame of great festival dedicated to Odessa and to connections to East Europa. And yes, so from January, also next opera projects in Italy and in Austria, and in summer again festival in Bayreuth, Richard Wagner Festival, where I am working in the production Flying Dutchman. together with Dmitry Chernyakhov, famous Russian director, stage director, who is in the also oppositionist to Putin. And I wanted also to say that it's very important moment for me to keep a relationship to such a great artists like Kirill Petrenko, for example, or Vladimir Yurovsky, or Semyon Bychkov, or Yevgeny Kisin, who was very who did strong message to the beginning of war against this aggression. And I think that such a leader are also a good example now to encourage also another Russian people to raise the voice against against Iran, against this dictatorship in Russia, and because only together we can have next future in our world, without war and without this aggression.
Incredible. I'm definitely going to find you in LA. I have room for 2 questions. We are way over time. 2 questions from the audience.
While questions maybe are being in preparation, I'd like to note very important, I think, for our meeting. I think the Russian aggression challenged the collective security in general, global, European, Western countries, and similar with the cultural heritage. I think that it's time for us, for cultural heritage people, to start maybe working over the strategy and implementation plan, how we can protect our cultural heritage when international conventions are not working. Hague Convention of 1954, both protocols are not working. The rules of war, Geneva Convention, is not working in this war. How we should not destroy cultural heritage in such scales as it was in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, now in Ukraine. We should do something. We should create some systems like that, closing the skies military, anti-missile system. We should create something similar in cultural heritage. In Ukraine, due to international donors and international organizations and research institutions, we, and Ministry of Culture, of course, we are trying to create the national system of response. We, at the moment, learn international experience in this. We adjust, translate different guidelines, textbooks, toolkits produced by UNESCO, by ICROM, ICOMOS, other institutions. We adjust, we approbate in Ukraine, and we try to create a kind of a model in Ukraine, what should be done on different levels, on horizontal, on vertical, how Ukrainian cultural heritage policies should be integrated into European policies, because harmonization of laws, very important. We're speaking that Ukraine is approaching European Union. It's not only, as mentioned today, political, financial, but also cultural. And we should work today. It is very important as far as I understand. So it's a great chance, and thank you so much for the opportunity to start working together.
Thank you. Thank you, Ihor.
Can I make a reference to what Ihor just said about these legal issues? So our help and support should be, of course, financial expertises, mental, and so on. But also what I learned from House of Reconstruction of Ukraine platform, it's the difference, legal difference between heritage status in Ukraine, also dating in some ways Soviet times. So I think European Union should advise, should help Ukraine in revising legislation that would make possible to honor certificates and licenses of specialists from Poland, for example, working on historic sites in the future. in Ukraine. Same for materials. Some material specifications in Ukraine pose problems. Some materials commonly used in historic preservation in Europe are not allowed in Ukraine. So those technical aspects are equally important than concrete financial help. So this platform for the exchange of information is very, very, very important.
Thank you very much, Robert. And with this, I'm going to close this panel. We are going to give the floor to Ares Shporta, Director of Lumbardhi Foundation in Prizren, Kosovo. Oh, okay.
But I think Ihor wanted to say something. I'd like to use this privilege to be here in person with you, and Europa Nostra so lavishly granted a lot of awards, and we would like very humble a certificate of gratitude and appreciation from Ukraine, from those cultural heritage people who have got such great support from Europa Nostra and partners. And this is a certificate of gratitude and appreciation awarded to Europa Nostra in appreciation of the enduring commitment and outstanding contribution to save heritage in Ukraine in times of war. It is your support that gives us strength and inspires to strive for our independence and democratic future based on universal human values, dignity, respect, and freedom. By saving Ukrainian cultural identity, we protect world heritage, diversity, and peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ihor. We have been given so many awards to other people, but this is a very, very great honor and great responsibility. Even bigger responsibility. We shall hope to live up to this certificate. So I just said that I think it's better to call it youth pontes. The bridges, in fact, between one and the two panels. And I would now like to introduce a wonderful, wonderful heritage champion, Ares. We have met, where was it? In July. In July, we have spoken a lot about Ukraine. You come from another war-torn part of Europe, the one that I also come from the Western Balkans, from Kosovo, from a beautiful country and a beautiful city of Prizren with bridges as well. And this is why we thought that it would be very important that you make the bridge between this panel and the panel on cultural heritage as a catalyst for peace and solidarity. So Ares, the floor is yours.
Sneska, thank you for this invitation and opportunity. This is the first time I prepare this speech. I usually tend to go on the go, but I think this is an important occasion and we need to make good use of the time. Cultural heritage was an intermezzo to my youth. 8 years ago, at 23 years of age, I was privileged to take on the revival of the oldest public cinema in Kosovo, which was opened 5 days before the Queen's coronation 70 years ago. I had to take on the task to follow up on the demands that 8,000 citizens and 58 non-profits put together when they stopped its privatization and made it a heritage site due to its importance to the local collective memory. After giving a chance to institutions in 2007, in absence of committed ones, citizens had to fulfill these goals. It was not heritage for its own sake, but as a tool to save a building from demolition, bringing people around something that unites, something greater than them, something they can't do on their own. to create the space and conditions to understand the city and its multi-layered histories, to get to know its many pasts and challenge ourselves with learning and unlearning, to understand the 20th century in our own context and imagine a different 21st century. With all the new tools it provides, it has been a story of survival, repair, healing, communicating, learning, feeling, and getting back at it. An archaeological and developmental journey. We are really grateful for the recognition with such an award and for the opportunity to make this address. My first memories are those of anxiety of war, the minute-long silences for the dead when I was in the first grade, news coming from villages and the streets, from Brussels and Washington, and eventually from the sky in form of bombs. My nightmares had Apache helicopters, war criminals, and my city burning. Having survived, I never thought of myself as traumatized or thought of my traumas as modest compared to those who lost their dearest, lost all of their houses, photographs and memories, lost their dignity, were forced out and expelled, displaced from their city and from the hope of some sort of normalcy. Growing up, I've been suspicious of the nation state. Intact at my home in Prizren between 1991 and 2008, I have been a citizen of Yugoslavia, Serbia, a UN-administered protectorate, and the youngest country in Europe, Kosovo, as my collection of respective passports shows. As I wonder what the future of passports and nation states will be, I want to extend my gratitude to the Czech embassy in Skopje for the 6-month visa that allowed me to revisit the Schengen Europe after 3 years and be here with you. As a student in Istanbul, back then a European capital of culture, I was enchanted with Prague and Mittel Europa through the words of Kundera, Kafka, Hašek, Musil, old man, I'm sorry, and many others that built my imagination of this place. So I'm always full of emotions being in this wonderful city. With high hopes on the Czech presidency, I hope this is actually the last time I will need a visa to enter the EU and be equal to all the citizens of the rest of the continent. But I like cities better than nations. They are much more open to the possibility of democracy. Also in my context, place of a national identity, and through complexity of the personal and family identities and heritages, identifying with the city was always easier and much more fun. My hometown, built over 2,000 years ago next to the Lumbardhi River, is the historic capital of Kosovo. It has a great place in the hearts, minds, and histories of Albanians, Serbs, and Turks. It goes back 2,000 years, even before these identities existed, with former Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ragusan embassies, Orthodox, Catholic, and Muslim sites of heritage, even the seat of the Jewish community in Kosovo. Home to one of the most world-renowned documentary film festivals, and a new generation building a new heritage on top of the multilingualism that is in its constitution. Prizren is one of the most European cities I've seen and been in, and I've been in many European cities. And being part Albanian, part Bosnian, and part Turkish, culturally Muslim, a Kosovan, I can still feel and be European in my own way, beyond the enlargement policy or the visa regime, and all the injustices and contradictions. One of the guiding ideals of our process was that of the ideal of the idiorhythmy, as Roland Barthes proposes, kind of a common rhythm that allows the individual rhythms of the particles to have a rhythm of their own. It is an idea worth exploring and listening to the small and the big members of the family, the weak and the young, the marginalized and the disadvantaged, the poor and the one in need, and of course the elders, and perhaps attain a different, fresher, and more appropriate understanding of our times and taking a different bet on the future. Let's allow ourselves, as heritage people, to think of the European Union and its communities as an intangible heritage, and perhaps use the contemporary tools of evaluating heritage, democratizing heritage, safeguarding, developing, and adapting heritage into rethinking Europe and our relation with it in the decades to come. Let's use heritage and its forums and agoras as spaces to go beyond the obvious, where citizens and professionals show other models and show the way to those that have the task to lead our ways. Commissioners, ministers, mayors, they come and go. Citizens, friendships, ideas, deeds, and cultures are those which remain and allow continuity. allow us to be who we are. With the weight of the generations and the state we are in on our shoulders, it is hard to feel young, but it is possible to feel fresh, ready to pull a bigger, longer fight, to not only stop a war, but stop a planet from destruction and build the muscles and the skills that will help us survive in all the crises that are coming. We need to be much stronger. There is knowledge and resources even in places we can't imagine. Learning from the past, putting ourselves in question, thinking and doing things really differently for a change might be worth the bet of this and the coming generation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ares. That is the type of the voice of the young generation that we need. We need in Europe, and we need in Europa Nostra. So we look forward to building many more bridges together with you in Western Balkans and in Europe. And this was a perfect bridge now to the second panel. And I would like to invite Luca Jahier, our fantastic ally, great leader for culture, Europe of culture, among the European institutions, former president of the Economic and Social Committee, but now a very, very important member of this committee and rapporteur on the opinion on cultural diplomacy that was just adopted 2 weeks ago. So the best person to moderate this panel, I think you will first start and then you will invite our inspirational speaker who has just arrived, the mayor of Athens, and then other panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Sneska, for these kind words. And of course, I have to say first that I am very happy to be with you again this year in presence to discuss a topic that is far from being new, but is still far to be recognized as a strong driver in EU policy priorities. We'll discuss this subject with 4 eminent panelists, and after will be the keynote speech by the mayor of Athens. I will present them when I will give them the floor: Andre Wilkens, Germina Stranojev, Lorena Aldana, and by remote Gaia Danese that comes from the EAS, so is the main institution in European constellation in charge of this. I have to remember to all of us, as we write and adopt so many declarations, that last year already Europa Nostra has already been very clear on this subject in the Venice Call to Action for a New European Renaissance. I want to quote, reading to you the point 11 and 12 of the Venice Call of Action. It was already very clear. The point 11 was saying, in the context of the EU external relation, mobilize the heritage ecosystem and stakeholders inside and outside the EU to implement through concrete and imaginative action the principle and objective of the EU Council conclusion adopted on the 21st of June 2021 to enhance the role of culture and heritage in the prevention and resolution of conflict and crisis. The point 12 was saying, pursue the groundbreaking initiative undertaken by the Italian presidency of the G20 to organize for the first time ever a ministerial meeting specifically devoted to culture, whose proceedings are reflected in the ambitious Rome Declaration adopted under the motto, Culture, Unite the World. This was the Venice Declaration last year, and this is by far not a new subject. In the last 20 years, not only we have collected so many declaration engagement, I have quoted more than 10 Council conclusions at European level in the last 17 years, communication, resolution by the Parliament, own initiative opinion by the European Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Region, but also by action, a lot of action has been developed at different levels, mainly UNESCO, mainly the EU Director General for Development, Member States, Museum, National Institute of Culture through the network that is EUNIC, private and cultural institutions, and many more civil society organizations. So there is a growing richness that unfortunately remains fragmented, not so visible, not a shared and coordinated strategy for culture to become a vector of the EU external relation and diplomacy. In times of permacrisis, as we have also discussed just several times yesterday and today, of unprecedented challenges to peace and transition to a sustainable world due to the unjustified aggression of Russia to Ukraine and to all the international agreed rules and principles, with the consequence of economic, energy, social deep crisis, one can consider that culture has nothing to do. It's not a priority again. On the contrary, as we had just heard also in the previous panel, war, peace are also and foremost a question of culture. And the way we consider heritage as a leverage for a common and a shared progress, or a major weapon to destroy another country via the structural termination of its cultural heritage and identity. And that's exactly what is happening. A country with an enormous and millennial heritage is exacting, pursuing this issue in Ukraine. It is not the first time, of course. The Balkans, Armenia, Daesh in Iraq. But this time, for the first time, I think we in Europe and the West world, we understand that this aggression, intention to terminate a culture for destroying an identity and to impose through an imperialistic approach another culture, to oblige all to stay under this culture in several ways, is something that shocked us as never before. So we are here today not only to strongly opposing to such thinking and action, but also to say high and clear that culture could and should be four things: a vehicle for dialogue, mutual understanding and cooperation for consolidating the fundamental values and principles in the human civilization. Second, a responsibility to protect everyone's heritage, in particular in situations of crisis and conflict, as a starting crucial point for reconstruction, but also as a way to preserve us to consider each one culture as the culture. Third, a powerful instrument for innovation, growth, jobs, socio-economic and territorial development, through also creative industries and tourism, of course, a sustainable tourism. And fourth, a driver to build the common new narrative and culture of the sustainable transition that we are dealing with. This should become the most powerful vector of EU external policy and the way to preserve, promote, and share the core of which is at the very foundation of Europe: value, peace, united in living diversity and solidarity. In the opinion that Sneska was quoting, that the committee has adopted in our external relations section by unanimity 2 weeks ago and will go to our plenary in the end of October, we praise exactly for this. And after 17 years of declaration, partial or globally. We remember the communication of the High Representative Mogherini in 2016 towards an EU strategy. It's far time to have a strong, active and in-action strategy forward, not only to think about towards a strategy. With 3 key points. First, the need finally for a clear action plan at European level, with a major role of the European External Action Service, with a dedicated structure and budget, and we propose the nomination of a special EU envoy for cultural external relations. The European Union has many envoys had in the past as today. We should have a special envoy that could become the visible point of convergence of the action of the different institutions of the European Union, for the member state, for the private sector, for all the other institutions. Secondly, we need to start. We have already done in some cases, the European Union is doing for Ukraine, but to start a visible and considerable number of actions in crucial areas, being Ukraine, as Europe is doing now, Western Balkans, Mediterranean and Middle East, and Africa. We need some pilot strong project that coalesce forces, being European international institution, member state, but also national organization and civil society organization. And third, a large and available for everyone mapping of the enormous list of action already in place. Because no one knows this richness. No one knows. No one can put a click and have access to a database where all this richness is quoted, and the creation of the EU platform for international cultural relations. This has been done in other sectors. We think to the Festival of Bauhaus, we think to the Circular Economy Platform, we think to the Forum for Migration, just to mention a few. It has been a positive way to convene all the actors and to reinforce, to share, and to give a visibility to this richness. So we are delighted to discuss this with the panelists. I will invite them to come to the stage with me. So I will start to present the first, please. André, Germina, Lorena, if you can join. So first, I will give the floor to the mayor of Athens. I'm very happy to welcome him again on the stage. I do not think that he needs so much presentation. Discussing about culture and starting from Athens is of major evidence from anyone. But also we have to say that Athens has also been at the crossroad in the centuries of international relations based on the cultural heritage. And also, you, Mayor, you have also played several roles in the European Parliament, World Bank, and also you have also a background in international relations. So, for sure, you can have inspirational words to say to us. Welcome to the stage, Mr. Kostas Bakoyannis. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a true privilege to be with you this morning, and I would like to thank the Dream Team for the kind invitation. Now, I must confess that I feel rather at home. After all, the Agora was an Athenian invention thousands and thousands of years ago, much like democracy itself. Democracy. What a wonderful concept. Take a moment to think about it, since most of the time we take it for granted. It derives from the Greek words demos, the people, and kratos, loosely translated or as power, or for the most barbarian amongst you, as a state. The power of the people, a novel concept that is ideologically charged and if I may say so, hoping that the Americanism will be forgiven, rather values-heavy. This is the point that I would like to stress, ladies and gentlemen, as an introduction. Democracy is not neutral. Democracy does not happen by accident. It is not a coincidence. It is a direct product of a number of choices, some soft, some hard, some implicit, some explicit, some painful, and some bloody. And it is associated, if not outwardly identified, with the history of Europe, the history of our dark continent in the 20th century. I'm reminded of Mazauer's eye-opening book that fought hard, tooth and nail, as they say, not to descend to authoritarianism, not to descend to division, not to descend to barbarism. And today's European institutions, Europa Nostra shining bright amongst them, are, even at their very worst, expressions of our better selves, allowing us to be grateful, and why not, healthily judgmental at the same time, even at the risk of self-indulgence. Now, I felt the need to begin with this very short reminder of who we are, our very democratic DNA, because at difficult and tumultuous times such as these, we all need a jolt. After all, we are all preparing for the winter of our discontent. Of course, some never needed any kind of a job, and I'm thinking of a great Athenian, the unforgettable Kostas Karas, whose many contributions were recognized in last night's award ceremony. Many of you, I know, had the honor of knowing him and working with him as he threw himself body and soul to his ideas. There's a lot our nature and our culture owes to Kostas Karas, including, I should highlight once again, as a mayor of Athens, Plaka and the larger Acropolis area. Bravely swimming against the tide, along with his moose and partner Lydia, and his friends and allies at the Ελληνική Εταιρεία, he quite literally changed the agenda and the terms of the debate by not only placing the environment full center, but also highlighting the symbiotic relationship between the environment and our cultural heritage. Now, can you imagine that? Beginning in Greece in the early 1970s, persuading and cajoling policymakers, making the impossible possible, and actually convincing politicians to think about the next generation rather than the next election? What a man. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we stand on the shoulders of giants, men and women who raged against the night. Thinkers, scientists, artists, activists, entrepreneurs, even politicians. They taught us that a challenge to nature is a challenge to culture, and at the end of the day, is a challenge to democracy. Case in point, evidence clearly shows that democracies are better for the environment and for our cultural heritage. It's been proven again and again that mature democracies, regimes with expanded rights, stronger institutions, and low levels of corruption have less urban air pollution, better environmental and cultural policy measures and outcomes, and stronger commitments to address climate change and protect cultural monuments. Mature democracies are more likely to sign and ratify multilateral environmental or cultural treaties, to designate, for example, larger areas of land as protected, and participate in more international organizations. The climate, culture, democracy link is explicit. Only in democracies can citizens hold leaders accountable, and people are increasingly concerned about climate and nature. And even though a democratic form of government does not, by itself, guarantee that a given country will lead on cultural or environmental issues, it is the only form of government that gives the people a chance to include their concerns in the political agenda. Indeed, nature, culture, democracy, the three great fundamental building blocks of our civilization. Or, to succumb to the temptation and use another Greek word, indulge me, I come from Athens after all, politismos, derived from the polis, the city, which relates to the politis, the citizen. The same politis that led progress from the Greco-Roman world, the Renaissance and humanism, all the way to the Enlightenment and Hobsbawm age of revolution to the present day. The same politis that built the Acropolis and 2,500 years later ensured in this, I should say, Athens is probably the only city that its landmark and symbol has this capacity, ensured that the Acropolis is visible from all around the city, from poorer and richer neighborhoods alike. 360 degrees of visibility, of hope, of inspiration. The same politis who, as we speak, dreads the winter and its coming, trapped in rising socioeconomic inequalities and injustices, with cost of life skyrocketing and energy poverty. No, families should not, ladies and gentlemen, need to choose between food and paying their energy bills in Europe in 2022. And the answer can only be more democracy, not less. Populism, misinformation, and political instability are detrimental to progress. If you have any doubt, listen to France, Sweden, and now Italy. The recent pandemic has dramatized the crucial importance of mature democracies in our globalized world. The need for the rule of law, the rule of reason, supported by transparency, accountability, and a bias for collaboration. Athens has in the last 10 years faced and survived a prolonged economic crisis, a large migration influx, the effects of climate crisis in, amongst others, unprecedented temperatures, and a global pandemic. These challenges initially brought the rise of a neo-Nazi party and widespread populism across the political spectrum. The same neo-Nazi party that was born in an Athenian neighborhood and died in an Athenian courthouse. And we didn't just bounce back, we bounced forward. Our democracy prevailed and is now stronger. And we are now, if I may say so, going through a post-populism era. And our trajectory might, I dare say, provide an example to countries currently undergoing populist and authoritarian convulsions. To deal with today's global crisis, we need more democracy, humility, data-driven policies, and an openness to innovation and collaboration within our cities and across our cities, like the collaboration with the Ελληνική Εταιρεία on founding this incredible, innovative regional hub. It is evident that many authoritarian rulers around the world today are ineffective at solving problems and are dangerous to their own people. What we need for the far-reaching crisis of today is forward international collaborations that can offer cross-sectoral support and foster innovation and social cohesion locally. Now, more than ever before, it is critical to build a more resilient world bottom-up. In case any of this sounds familiar, it is because you are in the right place. Thank you, Europa Nostra. Thank you, Ελληνική Εταιρεία, for leading the way. Many thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you really to the mayor. I think that everyone has noted these three keywords that he has left to us: nature, culture, democracy, as the three key pillars of the concrete action of any politician and politics. I think that these three words will feed a lot our thought. So we are going back to our panel. I have not a different question for any of you. The main question is already in the title. So how cultural heritage could concretely become a catalyst and a vector for peace, solidarity, and sustainable transition in a shared, strong, visible, and structured strategy. The first is Andrew Wilkins, is director of the European Cultural Foundation. For when I know you have always been at the core of this important foundation, but also of all discussion about the international dimension of the cultural action. And you are also one of the founding member of the European Council of Foreign Relations, so there is also an intellectual and strategic link with this dimension. So, Andre, you have the first floor.
Thank you, and we heard many good speeches today, and of course now also from the mayor of Athens. So thank you for that. But I want to pick out one speech we just heard recently from Aris, from Kosovo, and in many ways he actually expressed what I want to say. And that goes back to and his proposal to make European peace project, the European Union, in a sense, untangible world heritage, and I think is a great proposal. And why I think this is a great proposal is because we have forgotten what we have created after centuries of war and peace, which had become the kind of the sport of the Europeans. We got together and created something like a miracle, and that was the European community, the European Union later on. We created lots of institutions and so on, but we forgot why we created this. And at some point we thought we created this to create more efficient economy. But that was never the plan. The plan was to create a structure in which we can live in peace, prosperity, solidarity together. That has worked, but we have forgotten it in a way, in a brutal way. Putin has reminded us of who we are and what we want to be. I think it's brutal, and of course I'm thinking of our Ukrainian friends here in particular, but it may be a wake-up call for all of us to invest in this miracle of Europe again, and not only in an economic sense, and in a sense of course, bringing prosperity or a good life to Europeans, but also Europe as a cultural community. So that is my starting point. I think when we talk about peace and solidarity of Europe, we have something we have created and which has worked, and we have to rediscover it. We have to rediscover the peace machine of Europe, as I call it. So why culture? That also brings me back to the European Cultural Foundation, because maybe not all of you know that our founder is Robert Schuman. So we have three founding fathers. One of them was Robert Schuman, and he founded the European Cultural Foundation in 1954, at the same time when he created the coal and steel community. And the narrative behind that was coal and steel will create a kind of a European sharing economy, sharing the most essential things to create war, coal and steel, and making war impossible. But he said it does need more than sharing economic things. It needs a sense of European belonging, a European sentiment. And that's why he created, with friends, the European Cultural Foundation to promote a European sentiment, a European sense of belonging through culture and education. And that is our mission ever since 1954. So we are committed to this. 2022, and I would even say starting from 2020, with the start of the COVID crisis, Europe is under extreme pressure. Not only Europe, the rest of the world, but I mean especially now after the war in Ukraine, where there's one crisis piling up after the other. It seems to be almost every day, and I just come from Torino, from Italy, and there's a new crisis inside Europe in the making. So we're dealing with crisis all the time. And sometimes you kind of get dispirited. You can think, you know, how can that be? How can we get out of it? You are losing, and I have that too, you are kind of losing the sense of what can we do. But when I think about that, then I think back at my own history. I come from East Germany, and I grew up behind the Berlin Wall until I was 26. And what helped me in that time, what created hope, what created resilience, that was culture. It was cultural heritage, but that was also pop culture. That was writers like Václav Havel, that was songwriters like Wolf Biermann, but that was also punk divas like Nina Hagen from East Berlin, and that was Madonna and The Clash. So I could only survive that period in my time and with my friends through culture, through an aspiration, what can be there after that. And I think that is, for me, also an important lesson for these times. As the European Cultural Foundation, we have started in 2020, COVID, to create a Culture of Solidarity Fund, which is for us a translation of the idea of a European sentiment. What is a European sentiment? For us in our times, it is a sentiment of a culture of solidarity. So we said we need to support this in times of COVID because most of the responses were national. The Germans cared for their German citizens, the Italian for their Italians, and so on. There was at the beginning hardly any cooperation at European level, and we said we need to deal with this crisis of COVID together as Europeans. And I'm glad, and I think it shows that in a crisis you need to be bold. The European Union created the 750 billion recovery fund, which was a bold move, which was financed by Eurobonds. In a way, we don't talk about that because we don't really want to talk about Eurobonds, but basically it was financed by Eurobonds. So it was one of the boldest moves the European Union could do. And I think we need to do something in a similar way also now in response to the crisis in Ukraine. One thing which was missing of this 750 billion recovery fund was culture, because it said all sorts of infrastructure, digital things will be funded out of it, but no word of culture. So we created, I have to finish, just to say that. We said we need a cultural deal. We need a cultural component to the 750 billion fund. And together with Europa Nostra and Culture Action Europe, we promoted and we had a campaign for a cultural deal for Europe. And in fact, we were quite successful, I would say, because now in most European countries we have 2%, in some countries more, committed to culture from the cultural from the European Recovery Fund. So that is in calculation around 10 billion euro, which were not before, there in 2020, but which are now on the table for culture. And I think, to close this, and I know my moderator asking me, we need a cultural deal for Ukraine. We have shown that we can act in a crisis with force.
Andre, I will have a second round, but you have to allow and to stay in the 5 minutes. You have already go to 8 minutes, if not more. So please, we are already in a rupture of time. So thank you for this first introduction. Now we'll go to Jermina Stanoyev. She has such a long CV that it's impossible to present all her competence. I would say only that she's an independent expert in the field of cultural heritage, international cultural relations. She has started working a lot about the Balkans, that is already an headache, but a very specific region where to learn. And since 2009, she's an advisor on the role of cultural heritage in international cultural relations within the instrument of pre-accession assistance and many more others issues. So, Jermina, you, again, the main question, how we can do of this, of cultural heritage and culture, a structured vector of EU external policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, first of all. It's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to set a tone that maybe could be also a conclusion, but I like to put this narrative that maybe we haven't emphasized so much. Having the crisis times, I believe that it really requires for all of us to, in a way, become more accountable for the impact of international cultural relations that we are building and setting up. And that in practice really means that we should seek for more humble, more transparent, more really long-term international cultural relations in the world. And why I'm emphasizing in the world, we are facing crises that are global crises. So we, beyond the climate crisis, the war crisis, the health crisis that we somehow maybe even forgot as soon as the restrictions were lifted up. But all these three are global crises, and global crises are requiring global answers. And though Europe is really leading this way forward, working with international partners all over the world is extremely important. For example, I would hear, because Ares also gave me an introduction, and I would maybe zoom in into the Western Balkans and what the foreign policy instrument of the European Commission has been working on this, and it's one of the examples how we can tackle the topic. Working since 2016 in the really implementation of the strategy through different projects such as the Culture Diplomacy Platform and then Culture Relations Platform, we have been working on something that became, I would say, a pillar on international culture collaboration with the Western Balkans. And for example, working with grassroots organizations on consultation processes for developing specific regional programs, such as the Window program on the culture cooperation within Creative Europe for the Western Balkans, and another program that is Culture and Creativity for the Western Balkans that is now starting, and both having focus on cultural heritage, on the process of reconciliation, resilience, etc. So I would say that the development of regional programs that European Commission is really leading, and here it's not really easy because you have to look into instrument for pre-accession assistance that needs to put into a favor of culture, etc. So it puts together different Commission services, and that I would say was one of success cases. And here I would like to underline something that was really crucial for the development of these kind of programs, were consultation processes with non-governmental organizations and grassroots organizations, because they are processes with governments of these countries. They fall under rule of law and many other fields of, for example, when it comes to the Western Balkans, on the instrument for pre-accession assistance, but working with grassroots organizations is something very different, and something actually that allows us to understand what are the needs of the sector on the ground, and specifically the sector that is not usually, or the organizations that are not usually so well represented, small organizations, and that's something what Europe and Austria is doing well with their an umbrella of so many organizations having embedded in what they're doing. And I will just wrap up with no matter the borders and different instruments that we fall under within the European Commission instruments, it is really extremely important to have this common cultural space. That it doesn't really recognize so much borders and different instruments, but is above everything very safe for all cultural stakeholders, no matter on which side they are. And I hope that we continue this discussion because there are many other regions. I just zoomed into the Western Balkans because it was very appropriate having our previous speakers also addressing this topic. So yeah, that would be conclude within the 5 minutes.
No, you have been even shorter because you speak less than 4 minutes, so you will have something more. So thank you so much, but I will come back with another direct question later. And the third speaker is Lorena Aldana. She's an heritage professional from Mexico. You have worked with the European Commission at the time of the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018, but also with the OCDE. But today you are here as European Policy Coordinator of Europa Nostra, the leading and most representative pan-European Federation of Heritage civil society organization in Europe. So you cannot represent the view of everyone, but as you are the most credible representative and larger, you can say what from the point of view of a pan-European confederation of organizations that are grassroots, but also intellectual, but also leading institution should be done finally to transform really this richness in a vector of European foreign relation. Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you, Luca, for the introduction. And yes, I'm very happy to speak to you today on behalf of Europa Nostra with the, I think, somewhat challenging task of using just a few minutes, because I see Luca is counting, to explain and to share the vision and the work of Europa Nostra in the field of international cultural relations. So I had one slide, if the technicians could just show it on screen, please. So the title of my intervention, very short one today, is Europa Nostra, Building Bridges Across Europe and Beyond. So I just want to give you a few words of context to explain why is Europa Nostra sitting here today in this panel. And as Luca was saying, the view of the largest pan-European federation of cultural heritage NGOs in Europe in this field. So obviously our network, it covers the whole of Europe, but we are very well aware that in today's complex and interconnected world, which is, as we have seen with the different crises Armenia just mentioned, fast changing, but also highly interconnected, international cultural cooperation is not only desirable, but actually it's essential for the cultural heritage ecosystem to be responsive to change and resilient, to be sustainable as well in economic and environmental terms, and also to stay socially relevant and to contribute to these multiple crises. So for this reason, Europa Nostra has made out of cultural international cooperation a key priority, as stated in our strategic agenda Horizon 2025, which outlines our vision and our work for the next 3 years. But why is this important? Firstly, because obviously many of the key challenges that are facing the cultural heritage world, whether it's illicit trafficking, digitalization, climate change, these are well beyond borders. So even if we sometimes see some challenges that seem to be highly localized, really the heritage ecosystem can only benefit from sharing good practices, sharing knowledge transnationally. And also the other way around, cultural heritage can contribute to tackle global challenges, as outlined in the June 2021 Council conclusions on an EU approach to cultural heritage on crisis and conflict. Secondly, because we believe that Europe has not only the potential, but also an historic responsibility to sort of become a power for good and to lead in the in the global scene. So culture and heritage can be a tool, a distinctive tool for Europe to enhance its standing and positive influence in the world. And thirdly, because as we've seen today, Ihor was mentioned, HERI, the self-organized civil society grassroots movements, we see that in times of crisis or in difficult contexts, civil society action is effective. It's closer to communities, it's more flexible, so it can really reach regions or groups that governmental action cannot always. So now specifically, how do we plan to do this? So I will say by focusing on partnerships and on principles. Partnerships, because Europa Nostra is calling on the EU to launch in this particular time of conflict, global heritage partnerships. Firstly, we are proposing in the Western Balkans, so due to its cultural, geographical proximity and its high political importance, but also in Africa. So these global heritage partnerships would be pilot projects to empower civil society to tackle specific needs from climate change to crisis management, and this would really provide a platform for member states that are already working on this to act in an EU coordinated and better structured approach. I'm coming to the end. This is very much in line, Luca, with the opinion of the committee that was just approved. Indeed, it's Europa Nostra sort of concrete contribution to this particular opinion, and also a way to make the EU cultural strategy more concrete. So it's really our proposal for global heritage partnerships, and we are obviously stand ready to be civil society partnerships of the EU by mobilizing our wide network. Also as members of the Global Climate Heritage Network, as coordinators of the European Heritage Alliance, and through our 2 recently launched hubs. And my last word goes to principles. So I said partnerships and principles, and I believe Europa Nostra fully believes that these partnerships really need to be based on common values, so on the principles, shared principles of inclusion, justice, solidarity, but also democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And they should embody the EU willingness to develop partnerships not only on the basis of, rather on the basis of equality and not dependency. I would add, as Germinia just mentioned, accountability and transparency, and avoiding by all means the sort of division between north, south, receiver, and donor. So I believe, Luca, to come back to your question and just to close my intervention, that Europe does not only have the potential to contribute to a rules-based multilateral system, but really to lead towards a value-based and culture-driven one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorena. I think that your last words are the best way to introduce our fourth speaker. Unfortunately, she cannot be with us physically, but she's with us by remote. I saw her, now we all see her, Gaia Danese. Gaia Danese is an Italian career diplomat, and since 2000 at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she has worked for the Italian Embassy in Lisbon, Montevideo, and Madrid, and her last role was in Barcelona as a General Consul. Now she has a lot of experience in cultural issue and also some successful cultural project that she has developed in her mandate. But now the reason that she is with us today is that since March 2022, she is a second national expert to the European External Action Service to advise the Secretary General on cultural diplomacy and international cultural relations. So last year we had in Venice, in connection by remote, the Secretary General of the IAS, Stefano Sannino, was just presenting to us the Council conclusion that I quote in my introduction, And he anticipated to us that he want to make some step forward, but of course, last September he was not expecting the war in Ukraine and those also disruption. And now we have the lady that should be the engine in the EAS to start this process. So Gaia, we are delighted to hear from you how can Europe can organize itself to lead, as Lorena Aldana has said, this strategic process. Thank you, Gaia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this Agora. I also like the Mayor of Athens that I really greet also on behalf of our Secretary General, like very much the word Agora. I think it's a beautiful word to describe what we need to try to do together. I'm also very happy to be in this panel. I will immediately say to Andre Wilkins, please, let's have a meeting very soon. I would like to have an exchange with him. I'm very interested in the work of the EU Cultural Foundation. And of course, Luca, to have you as a moderator, as you know, it's perfect because we are completely in line in this vision about the need to go to action. The principles have been set, the legal framework is there, the values we all know. But we need to act, and let me say that we need to act globally and horizontally. These are not just words, because globally means a global strategic action, and horizontal means conceive culture as an horizontal policy, as it is climate change, the politics we need to implement to address climate change, digitalization, and all these kind of big issues that we have to address. So I want to say, because my intervention will be focused on commenting on the inputs that you are providing, because this is for me the added value of having these exchanges. It enriches our vision, and I absolutely agree with this bottom-up approach. We need to listen to civil society. We need to listen to stakeholders. We need to listen to cities and majors. I think they are important, very, very important players, because we need to connect community at small micro level to the international relations scene in its largest conception. So I like very much the document the draft document that Sneska, and thank you very much to Europa Nostra for organizing and inviting me. Sneska has shared with me this draft document, and I like very much this global focus, the focus on Africa, the focus on Western Balkans. I like, and I think also that another very important point is the equal footing approach. This is why I'm going to jump a bit on Lorena intervention. Lorena was speaking about a partnership on global heritage, and she was mentioning Balkans and Africa. She was speaking about pilot projects that would involve and empower civil society. And let me be a little bit revolutionary there. And in here, really, I bring you the thought of our Secretary General. We need to build this in complete co-creation with stakeholders in those regions, which means that, of course, we know our values and we know our principles, but we also start to listen. We also start to really listen to other values, other principles, and learn from them. And I can make a very practical example on climate change, because it is true that maybe we have things to tell to Africa and on climate change, but probably Africans have a lot to tell us about our relationship with nature, and we have a lot to learn from their approach in this field. So this is the kind also of internal revolution that we should do. There is a very nice formula that I've heard from OMC in the last CAC meeting. There is an OMC report which is very well done, and it's about climate change. And they were speaking about cultural courage for change. I think we all need to find this cultural courage for change together. To get now a little bit more precise, of course, Luca, we welcome the suggestion, and we not only welcome it, but we subscribe it. We need a structure. We need inside EAS, and this is what I am working on. Yesterday was with the Secretary General, and he confirmed to me that we are going to have a structure. We are really working on that, and we are, of course, going to have an action plan which is coming out very soon, and in which all these very valuable inputs that you are providing us, you, civil society, and also the other services of the European Union, the Commission, of course, the Parliament also, we are listening to everybody to have this action plan the more effective as possible. The question of resources is open. This is why also I would like to speak to André, because I think that foundations are also a very interesting stakeholder for us. And I'm speaking also of private foundation and of a partnership between public and private, a global partnership to create an even larger Team Europe that would also include private actors that want to stand for Europe, and they want to stand for Europe as a vector of intercultural dialogue, because we have to think about that. It is not about selling Europe abroad. It is about changing the world together and relaunching our civilization, but a new common one, because this, I really like the words on democracy that the mayor of Athens address us, but democracy has to be constantly rebuilt and renegotiated with all interested stakeholders in that. So this is what we have to do collectively now.
Thank you, Gaia.
That's it. I think, yes, this is, I want to conclude on that. Just note, please, that on the specific theme of cultural heritage, just let me say that EAS is reporting to PCC. We already ended a full report to the CIVCOM committee, and it's a very interesting document in which we detail about the protection of cultural heritage in conflict and crisis. So we're working also specifically on this item. But I wanted to be more general today because I think it is important. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any question from the room? Is there anyone that want to, as an urgent question that divide us? So I have a last question, but it is really 30 seconds for each of you. So after such a rich discussion that has further enlarged our view about what should be done to transform this cultural, this moving towards a strategy to transform culture as a vector. So my question to you is, if you had the capacity to decide tomorrow morning, what will be your first priority to make a concrete and strong step forward to have a visible strategy? 30 seconds, direct question, as in TV, Gaia Danese first.
I would really build a structure, and I will also start to work in co-creation with the rest of the world, on focusing on international cultural relation more than cultural diplomacy intended as a display of our cultural beauties, if you see what I mean.
Thank you, Gaia. So it's two priorities, a structure and co-creation with partners all around the world. Lorena.
Yes, thank you. Well, linked to Gaia's response, I think also a capacity building is extremely important. We now have the sort of framework, we have the policy framework, we have the governance structure, we have the funding as well, but we really need the capacity building of all actors to be able to really put this policy or principles into practice and to benefit also from these opportunities.
Thank you so much. Germina, from your point of view, the first priority for starting the process?
Definitely reinforcing regional programs. Within this, I would call it local strategy, because yes, indeed, we do have global challenges, but then every local reality is still pretty different. So reinforcing regional programs for actually enhancing international collaboration.
Thank you. It's clear. So, Andre, you have the last priority.
30 seconds. I would pick up on what Gaia say and create sustainable structures for public philanthropic partnerships, possibly, and I would propose as part of the cultural deal for Europe.
Thank you. So we have concrete indication. They are diverse, but they are very concrete. I do not want to spend the 7 minutes that I was allowed as moderator to wrap up, because it's too late, but only to say that what I said in my introductory speech, after 17 years of so many document, conclusion, reflection, resolution, and also so many different actions, it's time to make a clear step forward, to have a plan, to have a structure, and to have a place where to convene on a regular basis all the actors, state and non-state actors, all together to share this key priority for Europe, making culture a vector of EU external policy, EU diplomacy, in the sense of building up partnership of cultural relation with others. Thank you so much, and we go to the youth intermezzo. A narrated talk by Nicolas de Gleris, coordinator of the Europa Nostra Hub in Athens. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I will try to be 8 minutes short. That's what I've been told, because we're quite hungry. So, the founder of Elliniki Etteria, Costa Karas, who sadly passed away in February this year, 50 years ago, together with his wife, Lydia, who sits in front of me, they established Elliniki Etteria, ELET, as we call it. They even gave a middle name to their baby, this non-profit organization. They hence called it Society for the Environment and Cultural Heritage. In 1972, precisely the year in which the Club of Rome published its report, The Limits to Growth, 1 year before the oil crisis, in 1973, with the backdrop of an Arab-Israeli war, and while Greece's cultural heritage was being continuously and mercilessly ravaged by a dictatorship regime, Costa Karas has the strong intuition of associating nature and culture, and of seeing that these two subjects are the two sides of the same coin. Unfortunately, I had not had the chance to meet Costa Karas in person. However, I must say I have met him through the works of him I have been reading, through the projects, campaigns, and achievements of Elliniki Eteria and of Europa Nostra, to which he has been contributing all over his life. In a way, I have met Costa Karas through his legacy, his heritage. And please allow me to confess that this is what bears a large part of my confidence and trust and motivation in coordinating the Europa Nostra Heritage Hub in Athens. Leveraging on that legacy, on that heritage, and of course on the ones of Europa Nostra and all our partners and European institutions who have been proudly, for years and diligently, fighting for the preservation of our common heritage, the Athens Heritage Hub aspires to keep on walking on the avant-garde footsteps of Costa Karas. We will hence keep on questioning and challenging our visions, our models, our goals, our methods, and we will keep on strongly committing, together with the civil society, to building regional capacity in Southeast Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. And we will not only advocate for the protection and defense of our heritage, but also and foremost for its significance and relevance, especially when it comes to designing an inclusive and sustainable future. But what does heritage for peace and solidarity really means? I will go a bit further. Be that true, how we could further reveal the potential of heritage to provide for peace and solidarity. Allow me to try to answer the question by using a very tangible example that reflects on the principles and ideas that our dear panel has already spoken about. From the 10th until the 16th of October 2022, at the Prespa Lakes in Greece, which are surrounded by 3 countries, Albania, Greece, and North Macedonia, will meet for the first time around 10 young heritage professionals coming from 10 different Balkan countries and from different fields such as architecture, law, engineering, social sciences, and arts. Their mission, this Youth Special Task Force for the Balkans, as we call it, will co-create, will formulate several proposals for educational, research, and training activities related to the cultural and natural heritage of Western Balkans, addressing the needs expressed by the local civil society. Which is the modality of this co-creation camp? It will have a hybrid format between a seminar, a workshop, and a cultural trip. During the stay, the members of the Balkan Youth Special Task Force will enjoy several activities, allowing them to explore and get in contact with the rich heritage of the Prespa region. These activities will alternate with workshops where the young heritage experts will be joining forces to work on practical ideas and concrete outcomes. Can this whole event be observed as an action towards peace and solidarity between and among people and territories? Undoubtedly, yes. Yet, this is also a story of solidarity between countries which are within the EU and countries which are not yet members of the EU. The relationships we want to put forward here are not the ones between a colonizer and a colonized. And precisely, as far as heritage is concerned, non-EU member states have to share as many design, traditional techniques, craftsmanships, and cultural expressions with EU member states as the other way around. The idea of going beyond established semantic boundaries and binaries, it is, in my opinion, at the very, very heart of any project aiming at fostering solidarity and peace. In the Anthropocene, maintaining a binary between nature and culture appears somehow obsolete and counterproductive. For there is nothing in nature that is not a construct, that is not cultural, and vice versa, culture is a completely natural phenomenon that manifests not only within human societies, but also within societies of other species. going beyond the binaries, opposing young generations to elder ones by engaging them in collective thinking processes and by highlighting the essential role youth can play when actively involved in shaping a sustainable and inclusive future, can do nothing but strengthening the efficiency of our policies and the resilience of our democratic foundations. The idea of going beyond preconceived patterns, opposing sciences to arts, engineering to finance, hard skills to soft skills, it is also at the very heart of the co-creation camp in Prespa. The socio-ecological crisis we are currently facing is also and inseparably a crisis of our common sensibility in an era of increased digitalization, where fantastic immersive environments are generated by means of virtual and augmented reality. It is maybe urgent to resharpen our ability to grasp our places, territories, living organisms, built environments and landscapes by our senses. Working on our aesthetics literally means sharpening our ability to access knowledge through our senses. All in all, in Prespa we will try to go beyond boundaries and binaries opposing fields and disciplines, ages, EU member statuses, moments of creation and recreation, humans and their surrounding biodiversity, built environments and natural landscapes, top-down processes and grassroots. Our hypothesis is that peace and solidarity, when envisaged in a broad sense, and as such, when encapsulated in the making of heritage-related projects and policies, might in return enhance the agency or capacity, if you want, of heritage to provide for peace and solidarity in an even more meaningful and long-lasting way. Thereupon, allow me to thank you for your kind attention and wish you bon appétit, dobrou chuť, I will say in Czech.
Thank you so much. I think it's up to me or to you to say, is the space for lunch now?
Absolutely.
It's to you.
I think you have all deserved. This was an extraordinary morning. The first part, I mean, the two-thirds parts. Yes, I want to thank, of course, all the panelists from this panel and the previous panel, the two moderators, Nada Hosking. Thank you so much, Nada, and all the panelists of the first panel on mobilizing voices and forces for Ukraine. I think we have had some very good energy, good vibes, and a lot of work to do together. And special thanks once again to our Ukrainian colleagues and the certificates that I hope we will deserve it. We don't yet deserve it, but I hope we will deserve it. So thank you once again. For all of you, again, I think we have a lot of very concrete challenges ahead of us, and I think we will very soon visit together Gaia Danese in Brussels, and André, with your very forceful leadership on philanthropy and public-private partnerships for the culture of solidarity, something that you have been promoting so much. And of course, Europa Nostra, with our document that we will also distribute with all of you, the proposal of global heritage partnerships in Western Balkans, also in the Mediterranean. You have stressed the Africa, but of course the Mediterranean area, and I think Hispania Nostra is in the room. Hispania Nostra is also very keen to promote that in Latin America and Hispano-America as well. So Luca, and for you, just a comment. You are promoting the idea to have an EU special envoy for cultural diplomacy. And I think we really believe that you are a very good candidate to become that special envoy. So with all that, applause to all the moderators.